will be forthcoming. We still have just under 80,000 structures throughout the area that are still threatened by fire. And to deal with that, we have over 3,400 firefighters on the line. As far as evacuations go, in Sonoma County, zones 1 through 10 are still a evacuation order, and in Napa County, zone 21 is still an evacuation warning. With that, we are going to do like we did this morning and get an update from the National Weather Service. I'll hand it over to our incident meteorologist, Brian Walbrough.
All right, good evening. So once again, we did have very challenging weather conditions out on the fire lines today. We did have recorded wind gusts on the order of 75 miles an hour. As we move into this evening, we are still under that. Humidity values remain critically low. We've been down to about 9% and are staying in the teens, so those are tough firefighting conditions. The good news is as that red flag warning expires tomorrow, it looks like we have about a 24-hour window of favorable weather Monday afternoon and into Tuesday. We will then be getting ready for another wind event as we look into Tuesday night into Wednesday. And right now, unfortunately, we have no rain in the forecast through the end of the month. Thanks.
Next will be our fire behavior analyst, Steve Vollmer.
Good evening. With the new location of the fire, we're continuing to see the erratic fire spread along with long-range spotting as it continues to move. We're still modeling the fire behavior on the west side of Highway 101 as well as the fire behavior in the current area where the fire is burning. When we have the wind shifts that will occur tomorrow afternoon, that's going to greatly aid the firefighting effort. It's going to decrease the intensity of the fire, decrease the flame lengths and the rate of spread, and allow us to go after it a little more aggressively. However, it will wind test the northeastern section of the fire up in the high country. We will see increase in fire activity again Tuesday evening when that other system comes through.
And for an operational overview of what is actually occurring on the line right now, we have Incident Commander Mike Blankenheim. I'll turn it over to him.
All right, good evening, everybody. A quick recap of where we were at this morning. So both the weather predictions and the fire behavior predictions proved to be extremely accurate today. The wind surfaced around 1 o'clock this morning and brought the fire out of the hills here and across Highway 128 at around 3 o'clock this morning. At about 11 o'clock this morning, the fire was impacting the 101 freeway between Windsor and Healdsburg. So from 11 o'clock this morning till now, fortunately the fire has not crossed the 101. The wind is kind of lined up in a more northerly direction and is pushed straight south on the east side of 101. Currently, the fire edge is somewhere just south of the community of Windsor near Shiloh, where our resources are actively engaged in both perimeter control and attempts at structure defense.
And before we let the Incident Commander back to the command post, are there any questions related to operations for him? Okay, perfect. With that, we'll hand it over to Sheriff Essick.
All right, good evening. So we've been getting a lot of questions up tonight about evacuation. Are the evacuation orders still in place? Yes, they are. So all the areas that we have ordered to be evacuated earlier still remain in effect. The way that you, the public, can keep up to date on evacuation orders is you can text your zip code to 888-777, that's Nixle, 888-777, text your zip code, and you will be updated on evacuation orders and when we start to repopulate areas, but we are not there yet. This afternoon I had a chance to take a look at the fire from the air, from the Sheriff's Office.
All right, so you're just hearing a recap of the Kincade Fire from CAL FIRE. We want to apologize for some of the audio, but we also want to be transparent that that was pre-recorded. It wasn't live, like we mentioned. But just kind of recapping, 54,000 acres burned. The containment went from 10 down to 5%. So not a great idea. They also mentioned that they have 24 hours of favorable wind conditions from Monday to Tuesday before the other wind event comes up.
Yeah, and almost 100 structures lost, but the great news out of that is it hasn't jumped 101,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. But the evacuations all the way to the Pacific coast remain in place. We heard a bit of a weather update on that fire about how they're having low humidity, but they might get a bit of a break in the weather tomorrow. We want to widen the lens out and go to Monica. Monica, you've got an update on those winds, which are really driving all of the stories right now.
Yeah, you're right about that. Take a look at some of these hot spots. This is specific for the Kincade fire. Now, its origination way up here. North winds for today, upwards of 60 miles per hour, driving that fire southward and over towards the west. You mentioned 101, shut down for a portion today. Look at how close some of those hot spots got for today. This is the active fire areas all in the red, and a number of those developing for today. Not a huge surprise. We knew these winds were coming, and it was going to be a tough firefight for today. Here's a look at the smoke plume as we take a look at that fire, and you can see here's the Kincade fire smoke just really shooting right off the coast there. Some of it, unfortunately, did make its way into the valley. This is what things looked like at 2 o'clock this afternoon with our air quality. Hazardous air for the northern San Joaquin Valley. That included Stockton, Modesto, the Delta, all the way over towards the East Bay area. Now, keep in mind, at that point, we also had that fire burning in Vallejo that shut down I-80 for a period of time. Air quality improved by about 5 o'clock. But we also had a fire along I-5 that created some air quality problems in the Sacramento area. Again, rather contained. It wasn't a widespread fire that was putting out a big smoke plume. That is mainly coming off the Kincade fire. It has started to decrease a bit, but here's what happens at night. Fires tend to settle down into the lowest point, into the valley, and that's where that smoke goes as well. Those of us that live in the valley, probably going to feel a little bit of smoke as we head into tonight and early tomorrow. Again, we have the high wind warning in place until 11 o'clock tonight. Gusts up to about 60 plus miles per hour still potentially. Now, when I show you the red flag warning, it extends across a much broader range here, all the way northward into the valley, southward into the San Joaquin Valley, through Yosemite, with gusty winds and low humidity continuing, and all that fuel is just critically dry at this point. Now we get on to some of those peak wind gusts for today. Alpine Meadows over 100 miles per hour. Jarbo Gap and Pulga, that's closer to where the campfire started last year. We're talking about close to 70 mile per hour wind gusts. Georgetown 64, Vacaville 58. Now, as far as our current winds, really was the best way to look at this is to look at the contours, the colors on this map. You can focus on the numbers, but that's just going to be specific to that particular site. Keep in mind, California has a lot of variety in our topography. We have peaks, we have valleys, we have canyons. So this helps define just a little bit more how variable those winds can be in a couple of focus areas here. Just north of Highway 50, south of Highway 50, and again, extending southward towards Yosemite. Okay, so that's the current winds right now. Generally out of the north, and still those offshore winds, very dangerous fire conditions. Peak wind gusts earlier today, closer to about 50 miles per hour for Sacramento, 64 for Fairfield, and we're just now starting to see things ramp up for the foothills. So take a look at it as we put this into motion. You're going to see that we're still going to see a big focus area being the Sierra foothills along I-80, Highway 50, in that corridor, and then north of I-80, south of Highway 50. The color that I want to point out here is the purple. Unfortunately, as you look up here, those are 50 plus mile per hour wind gusts. Now, here's the catch. We're seeing a little bit of break right now for the coastal range. This is going to be at midnight when we see a little bit of more intensity, very small concentrated area in the coastal range. And then unfortunately for the foothills again, this is going to go until about 3 o'clock. Now, as quickly as these ramped up, they're going to shut down. So as we take it through 7 a.m., pretty much done with the winds. So tomorrow morning, still pretty breezy, but we're going to see it much less than what we had for today. All right, now here's the catch. You heard from that CAL FIRE update. We get a small window of opportunity to get the upper hand on that Kincade fire, and here's why. Tuesday afternoon, we are right back at it. But it looks like right now the biggest focus area will actually be on the east side of the valley, because the low that kind of promotes this behavior is going to be just slightly east of the state, more so than what we had for today. All right, here's another look at some of those peak wind gusts in and around the Kincade fire. This was 103 miles per hour. Didn't see as strong of a gust period yet for the foothills, but again, we're still looking at that to ramp up for tonight. Here's the pattern that I'm talking about. For today, we basically had that low that moved off the coast, high pressure ridge moved into the Great Basin, promoting those offshore winds. It's a classic setup. Now, unfortunately for this time of year, it's very easy to get this set up because we start to see some shifting of that storm track. Keep in mind, we've been dry for several months. Now we're starting to see the opportunity for more rain as those lows move in. It just has to get up around that big ridge of high pressure. So we call these Diablo winds up north, Santa Ana winds down south. They accelerate through the hills. They dry, they warm, and then they create that explosive fire growth that we've seen over the past couple of years. Okay, so I showed you a couple of different wind speeds that were occurring for parts of the coastal range compared to the Sierra. So here's what's happening. Basically, I have that high pressure ridge over in the Great Basin. We get the winds on that offshore. So we're going to take it from east to west, that being like the Pacific coast, let's say. So we get those winds that cool as they rise, and then they warm and dry as they head towards the valley. So this is going to be the Sierra Nevada. This would be, say, Tahoe or even over towards Truckee. All right, so then we get to the valley. We get another cooling pattern here with the winds, and then they start to get up over the coastal range. And then, shorter period of time, more compression, warm, dry, and they can be even higher than what we see on the east side of the valley towards the Sierra. Again, here's the active fire perimeter for that Kincade fire. It's really explosive fire growth that we saw for today. And then our wind timeline, we may see some more growth happen by the time we get to Tuesday and Wednesday. Tomorrow's going to be the day that we start to see this critical fire danger decrease during the afternoon. And it won't be until Tuesday afternoon that we really start to see it ramp up. So again, about a 24-hour period, and it will be a bigger event. It looks like right now on the east side of the valley. Thursday, Friday, lighter winds. Looks like we'll finally get a bigger break in here. The reason why, as I explained, this low right here looks like it's going to be just slightly off to the east here. So we'll still have the strong winds returning, but given the position of that particular low, just slightly lighter than what we saw over the past 24 hours. I mean, last night at this time, we were talking about no wind at all in the valley. So here's the shift in our fire behavior, our fire danger. Really goes down for tonight through the valley, but it's still focused through the foothills. The Sierra foothills still in play here tonight, all the way through about early tomorrow morning. Then we get a nice break on Monday, but look at this. This is Tuesday afternoon. It is right back in the valley, right back on the west side of the valley, through the Sierra foothills. So we basically have to get ready for not a near repeat, but a little bit lighter event for Tuesday into Wednesday. All right, in those focus areas that I pointed out, for the foothills and for the coastal range, they got a lot different vegetation than, say, here in the valley. We saw a couple fires break out. They were grass fires, basically, but the coastal mountain range has heavier trees, and quite frankly, so does the eastern foothills. But they're going to combine also the grass and the brush as well. So they've got a lot of fuel to burn, as well as 149 million dead trees after that historic drought that we had. Bark beetle got in there and really did a number on the Sequoia and the Sierra. All right, lots of damage coming in. This is Fairfield Fire from earlier today. You can see a number of trees down. Also had some pictures coming in. Karen Chan sending this in from Natomas. Lots of wind damage, some fences down. So if you have photos, send them our way, Weather Force at abc10.com, or you can text us. Our number, 916-321-3310. All right, so like I said, Brandon, Ananda, got a little bit of a break here. It's only going to be about a 24-hour period tomorrow afternoon through Tuesday, and then we're right back at it.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We are following breaking news. As we've been talking about, we've got 3 million people without electricity right now tonight. PG&E shut the power off on purpose to prevent fires, but still, we've got fires burning all across the state, including one where there are questions about whether a PG&E power line may have been the root cause. 180,000 people are evacuated because of the Kincade fire tonight, and we don't have any idea when they're going to get to go home.
Now, historic winds pushing the flames into neighborhoods, threatening some of the same communities that burned in the North Bay fires just 2 years ago. Those winds plus extremely dry fuel. We've seen fires from coast to coast to the valley to the Sierras, and those power shutoffs could go on for days, possibly until late next week.
Yeah, we've got more than 3 million people now without power. That number has been jumping around today. Customers around 38 counties have power out right now. That makes this the largest PG&E preventative power shutoff ever. It's a blackout on purpose, trying to prevent fires, even bigger than those massive shutoffs we had just 2 weeks ago. Keep in mind, when they talk about a customer count, there are now over 1 million customers affected. That is not one person, that's one power meter. Cal OES tells us we've got an average of 3 people per power meter, which means we've got about 3 million Californians without power right now. And not only that, PG&E expects more shutoffs to start on Tuesday. Another round Tuesday and Wednesday because of those winds Monica was telling us about. And some of the folks who are affected by these shutoffs that we have going on right now may not get the lights turned back on before this next round hits. So you have the potential for people to be going as much as possibly an entire week without electricity here in the wealthiest state in the wealthiest nation on earth.
And it's crazy to think, and so many people have lost thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, a lot of these small businesses. I do want to address, we are live on Facebook Live, and someone was saying they don't have any power, but they can stream on Facebook, so they just wanted to give us thank you. So just wanted to address people. If you have any comments, please drop them in the comments on our Facebook Live here on ABC 10. And like we said, fires burning across the state. A fire in Vallejo closed down I-80. Another over near Natomas closed I-5 in both directions. That I got caught in that. It took me an hour and a half just to get to work. It usually takes me about 10 minutes. And fires have popped up across Northern California.
Yeah, and we've been talking about those high winds. You probably felt them all day, even last night. But those are contributing to the fire danger we've been seeing. We've got pictures from you all over the area. This is a look at Midtown in Sacramento. Trees are down on power lines. We've actually had quite a few power outages down here in Sacramento in the SMUD service territory. Even though SMUD has been safe from these, deliberate shutoffs to try to prevent fires, we know we're the city of trees. I know we're farm to fork now, but we're also the city of trees, and plenty of them are falling into stuff tonight.
Yeah, we were getting calls last night. About 3,000 customers were without power, and it was just in the downtown, midtown area last night. And they also said that they weren't going to do any preventative shutoffs like PG&E, and at that time they said that they didn't know what the reason was. But a lot of customers without power last night. Yeah,
we are still following the mop-up of a fire that started around 9 o'clock in the morning in Vallejo near I-80. If we can get to our video of that. Here we go. The Glen Cove fire, they are calling it. These are the hills in Vallejo. If you drive I-80 to the Bay Area, you recognize this area. The highway was shut down both ways. It closed the Carquinez Bridge for hours. We also had the academy there, the Cal Maritime Academy, which is right along the water. They had to evacuate. Parts of that campus burned up. That is how close the fire got to the water. Actually jumped over the strait there to the other side of the bridge, spotted a fire in Crockett. That one burned more than 150 acres. Cal Fire has got it pretty buttoned up, but and have lifted the evacuations there. But the people of Crockett, you look at that. That is the toll plaza on the Vallejo side.
And you have to keep in mind, I was just there 2 weeks ago with the tank fires in Crockett, and I was hearing sirens the entire time. Like, this area, it's impacted again. And what was crazy about those fires is that we were hearing sirens, people were really concerned, and then now this.
Yeah, we want to show you this other video from right there on the toll plaza, or right near it anyway. This came into us along I-80 near Vallejo. Flames and smoke there because of this fire. We also understand it's done a little bit more damage than may meet the eye. We haven't really lost any homes, thank goodness, in the Vallejo area, but we've had power shut off that wasn't part of this planned outage as a result of this. PG&E has lines in the area here too. Vallejo's now declared a water emergency because of that, and that's because the city's pumping station can't work right now because it's been shut off.
Yeah, Anastasia Bolton was in Vallejo to give us an update on the water situation over there.
We are at the Vallejo Fire Station number 21. That's where the emergency operations center was set up this morning, and they just disbanded it later this afternoon. The reason why we're here are the emergency water restrictions for the city of Vallejo. It affects more than 100,000 residents. Why? Well, because the power is off and the generators that clean that pump the raw water for treatment, they're not working. So the city is asking residents to conserve water. There is no outdoor watering, and in terms of indoor watering, limit that to a minimum. While the city is working with PG&E to restore power, there is no timeline at this point as to when that might happen. This is not a common event, according to the spokesperson for the city.
Not in the last several years. We haven't seen restrictions on water like this. We have had other major water main breaks where water has been impacted and people have been completely without water. And so we did kind of operate the EOC 4 years ago for the Broadway water main break. But that was about a quarter to a half of the community. So this is something that the city has experienced kind of at a different level. We've been able to support our residents in getting water back on and getting bottled water and those needs fulfilled. It's just a different event because of the power outage. So as soon as we can get raw water flowing again, we'll be able to treat it and turn it around very quickly.
The city says it is working on getting essentially a giant generator to help with the water treatment. But again, there is no timeline as to at least when the power will be back and when the residents here in Vallejo will be able to use water. So again, water restrictions are being enforced here in the city because of the power outage. Back to you.
Anastasia Bolton bringing us that from Vallejo. Got to give a shout out to our parent company, Tegna, by the way. Anastasia and I work together at our station in Denver. She's now in Houston. I'm now here in Sacramento. But we all come together when there's big news like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that we're able to do that with our company.
It's a great resource. Honestly, we're able to bring in people and beef up our staff, which is fantastic. We go there. I've been at hurricanes. People come here for wildfires. All right. So some of you are commenting on Facebook right now. I want to just address a few things folks are saying. Kathy chimed in and said, this looks like paradise all over again. You know what? When you take a look at that Sonoma County fire, there are some parallels. Yeah, I mean, we have a report from PG&E of a transmission line in that area that had an outage right at the place where this fire started. We are not at the point where we can say that was the cause of the fire, but we can tell you CAL FIRE's got tape around it, which is what they do when they're investigating the cause of a fire. So 2 + 2, you do the math in your head. Yes, it does look a little bit similar to what we had there. The good news is the similarity that does not exist, we do not have 85 fatalities, and let us hope we do not have any fatalities in this. We've at least had it burning for hours now and have been able to get a lot of firefighters in. They're not able to stop every home from burning, but thank goodness they're there. Elaine also chimed in and said that she's happy for the firefighters. It's not 100 degrees. I'll tell you, there's a flip side to that coin. If I think back to Paradise, it was freaking cold.
It was so cold, and also Paradise was in November. I remember going up there and I was wearing all my boots and stuff because thinking, well, not my boots, I was wearing tank tops and just thinking it's going to be hot because we're covering a fire, but it was so cold.
When you got howling winds, you know, you get past the main event, it took the town of Paradise an entire day, but then you dragged into days and nights and it was just, you know, really rough conditions. But the firefighters, man, they are used to operating in all kinds of conditions that we just can't even imagine. They are not comfortable doing their jobs, but my goodness, they do a heck of a job.
Oh yeah, they absolutely do. I was following one of the firefighters, a group of them, during the campfire, and I had to hike. Really, I think it was probably 2 miles uphill, just hiking. And this is what they do. That's how they build that containment line.
Yeah, I know. We like to show the video of all the aircraft doing their thing, and they are an important tool. But those hand crews on the ground, they're the ones who are really just, you know, busting their humps. They carry some of these guys, the sawyers, you know, that are carrying the chainsaws. They can be loaded up with 70 pounds of gear, and they're hiking for miles. And that's what they do to stay in shape. They hike with all that stuff on them. I mean, I've heard stories about guys who show up to do that job that are all jacked up, you know, bodybuilders, and they're skinny, like, you know, beanpole at the end of the training, because that's just how much it works your body. It's crazy what they do.
And so we're kind of looking through the comments here. Someone was talking about the wind in Elk Grove. I was here last night until 4 o'clock in the morning. I shouldn't say last night. This morning until 4 o'clock this morning. We did send one of our crews out there to the Rao fire that was caused by one of the lines. It wasn't a PG&E line, it was a SMUD line, but we sent our Boise crew out there. We're also going to toss over to another story that he did. We sent our Joey Prechtel to downtown Placerville, a community that's been without power since yesterday, and this is going to be their 3rd time too
that they've been shut off. Let's take a look. if we have it.
Downtown Placerville is really split into two different sections today. You have businesses on one side of the street that are in the dark due to the PG&E Power Shutoffs, but then businesses just on the other side of that very same street have their power and they're open today.
Millie the meerkat?
The Bookery is one of those stores in the dark, as customers used flashlights to look through books they wanted to buy.
Book shopping by flashlights, pretty rad.
That's Allison Bendel. She came to Placerville with her family after their original plans fell through.
So we came to go on the train rides up in Shingle Springs. They do like a Sunday train ride, but they weren't doing it because of the weather and the power outages.
And the Bookery is one of her favorite stores. Darren Coelho runs it.
Business has been down pretty significantly on the days that we've had no power.
While one side of the street is in the dark, the other is far from it.
One side of the street has underground lines because the government buildings are on that side. This side of the street has above ground lines. So that side is able to tap into generators that our city has.
So while the Bookery is running in the dark, other stores like Man Cave Placerville do have power. But one thing is weird about this store having power. It's on the same side of the street as the Bookery. Todd Pickett, the owner, says this is different than the last time PG&E shut off power on Thursday.
We didn't have power then, and then 2 weeks before that, we didn't have power. So we've been out, and then the city's been doing some things to help the businesses.
Both stores hope these power shutoffs become a thing of the past, since it's hurting their bottom line overall.
This street's lost thousands, if not millions of dollars. The restaurants have lost food. People aren't coming down. People aren't going up for Apple Hill. So it's costing us millions of dollars.
I talked with a rep from PG&E earlier today. He was at the Community Resource Center here in Placerville. He told me that the community can expect to have the all clear tomorrow morning starting at 6 o'clock. However, that does not mean that the power will come right back on at 6. All that means is that crews from PG&E will start going out, inspecting the power lines, checking for damage, checking to see if it's safe to turn that power back on. Back to you.
Yeah, and as Joey was saying, he's talking to PG&E about their stance on things. One thing they are not saying is that they're going to compensate any of those businesses for the millions of dollars you heard one of the business owners say that they're losing as a result of this.
Yeah, I went to Nevada City on Friday. A grocery store lost $60,000 just from the first power shut off. And then another business I spoke to, a brewery, bakery, they told me that they are not going to make any profit this year, and they still have no idea how to talk to their employees because they don't know how long this power shutoff is going to last for.
Right, and you know, if you've got employees on the payroll, that's burning a hole in your pocket if you can't open, if you literally cannot do your business. But PG&E has consistently maintained they are not going to do this. That is not their policy to pay people for planned outages. The pushback on that has been fierce, and Governor Gavin Newsom, who, by the way, benefited to the tune of more than $200,000 for his election campaign, has been now really criticizing PG&E, saying they need to pay people for these losses. Businesses, yes, and then also people's, lost food in their refrigerator. But PG&E has not budged one bit, and now we are going to be looking at possibly a third round of these enormous shutoffs that are going to affect millions of people. So it's an unresolved issue right now, and one that is potentially really expensive. If you look at just the one earlier this year, the back of the napkin math I had on that was even if they just did the $100 credit that the governor has been proposing and saying you really need to do this, that's an $80 million tab to pay that.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think about.
And I'm also hearing in our producer that we have our Giacomo Maluka who's ready right now. He's over on Highway 50 where there are some road closures because of down power lines. Giacomo, what do we know?
Well, right now we are at where this power line has fell. What actually happened is, you can't see it right now because it's
over here,
pitch dark out. But what happened was do you have me? A power line went down, actually a power pole went down, and of course the lines came with it. Right now, PG&E crews, they are here on the scene working to get that replaced and fixed up. There's a couple of guys out here, and it looks like they're doing a really good job. It's just taking a little bit of time. US 50 in both directions, experiencing some pretty serious traffic conditions And as all of you know who travel back and forth between Tahoe, Sacramento, and really this is mostly impacting Placerville to Tahoe, there is some pretty serious traffic. We sat in traffic for about an hour and a half for something that should have taken us about half an hour. So one of those issues that unfortunately we have to deal with, but the power line was down. The power was out, so no threat of fire here. That's also good news. But of course, as these PG&E workers work to get that pole restored, folks are going to have to continue dealing with the impacts to traffic right now. And right now we're in Kybers. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Giacomo, so you're saying essentially the power shutoff did its job because this power line failed. The problem, of course, is it failed right onto the roadway. That's the issue right now. We were having a little bit of trouble hearing you at the beginning there. Can you just tell us, is 50 back open in both directions? It sounds like you've got cars flowing past you.
So there's traffic coming through, but I'm not exactly sure which agency has the roadblock set up, but what they're doing is letting in portions one-way traffic come through. But it's moving
controlled, basically. They got flaggers, that sort of thing.
Control. Yeah, and another thing that again is important to say about this wasn't specifically the break in related to PG&E. This wasn't a power line that fell. This was an entire power pole. I can't tell if it cracked in half or if it just fell over, but must have been some pretty serious winds, whatever took it down.
Yeah, all right, and we know we're expecting the foothills to continue to get pounded today up there in the Sierra. Giacomo, thanks for staying on top of it. We'll look for more a little bit later.
All right, PG&E is telling people to prepare to be without power for several more days, especially with the incoming weather event early next week. PG&E is getting extra help from the state and from other utility companies across the country to inspect and repair any damage from during the shutoffs. They're hoping that will speed up the process. Well, if you are watching tonight, perhaps your power is out. ABC 10's Chris Thomas has some things you can do right now to protect your home.
Unplug or turn off your appliances. Leave a single lamp on to alert you when the power does come back on. Use generators, camp stoves, or charcoal grills outdoors only. And check on your neighbors. For people dependent on medical devices, these shutoffs are not just inconvenient, they can be dangerous.
All right, hey, we're getting comments in here, and Jody says, nobody pays people for a loss when somebody crashes their car into a PG&E power pole, do they? I don't understand the blame game. So sad, all these people without power losing money, etc. But she's upset that it's all about blaming somebody. Here's the thing, Jody. When we talk about these shutoffs, the reason the shutoffs are happening right now is because we can't trust PG&E's power equipment not to start a fire right now. This isn't like some sudden new thing. Now, PG&E will talk about weather changing and us having more extreme weather. That's true that we have a trend towards generally more days that are bad for fire weather. But on the flip side of the coin, we have pieces of equipment from PG&E that are failing that absolutely have no business failing. If you take a look at the campfire, that was a transmission line. These are those big high tension power lines. They clear away the trees for a far distance away from those for a reason, and they're not supposed to fail in high wind. I did an interview with the CAL FIRE chief, and he said this is absolutely not the sort of thing that you would expect to happen in a high wind event. It's not supposed to, and yet it keeps happening. We now have a suspicion that that may have been something that happened on this fire, the Kincade fire, out in Sonoma County. And in the case of the campfire, we're coming up on the year anniversary of that. 85 people lost their lives, and we lost an entire town that is going to be rebuilding for years. I've been up there in Paradise talking to people ahead of this anniversary, and I'll tell you, we've just now got the first homes being rebuilt after that fire a year later. And kudos to the cleanup crews, because right now, if you go up there, it looks like basically a giant construction site that is yet to begin. That's what it looks like. You don't see those, chimneys standing and everything. They've literally scraped almost every lot down to bare dirt, which is a heroic feat when you consider the fact that there are tens of thousands of buildings up there. They had to have two or three different contract companies with dump trucks taking all the stuff to 3 different dumps. I mean, it has been a long road up there for people just to get to the place where they can start to rebuild.
And there's the water issue too on top of that. So that's another big thing that people are worried about too.
Right, and the thing is, and you're talking with me still again, your power was out again due to a line, not sure why it was down. Understand, Jody, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to fight with you. I'm just saying this issue of PG&E saying, oh, this is the weather, they do deserve to accept some of the responsibility for what's going on here. Their equipment has failed under conditions it should not. And that is why we're in this boat. And frankly, the reason we are talking about millions of people being without power right now instead of pockets of a few thousand or hundred here and there is because of those transmission lines being shut down. So just don't lose sight of that as we're talking about all this stuff. It's one thing to shut down a neighborhood here or there because, you know what, the wind is really extreme there. But these transmission lines, those big high tension lines on those steel towers you see, those things should not be failing in the wind. They are. We can't trust them not to. And that's why 3 million people in Northern California are in the dark right now.
And some other people commenting here. Merritt Graham said that PG&E has not maintained their lines for years. They need to go. They shut off lines, yet they still start fires. They have to go. I want to bring up the Nevada City mayor because I was talking to her on Friday. She was saying that they're trying to figure out a plan, like a short, mid, and long-term plan because they're tired of PG&E because their city, it's an economic issue now.
Sure.
With these power shutoffs.
Oh, it's billions of dollars that the state's economy is losing because of this. Was it Merritt? I'll put in a little plug here. We're going to run some pieces from Fire Power Money. This is an in-depth series that we worked on for the better part of a year here at ABC 10. It's a 3-episode series. If you want to look it up on YouTube, just type in Fire Power Money or go to firepowermoney.com. But it's 3 episodes all about the crisis behind these shutoffs that we're seeing right now and what's going on with PG&E. The first episode deals with the fire problem, and you do have to level with people. This is not entirely PG&E's fault. It's a very complicated problem. We are seeing fires do things that they haven't before. Amid that backdrop, we also have this power company that's literally been convicted of felonies and is serving time in federal court for it right now that is having to shut off the power, and they've got a federal judge breathing down their neck to do it. He doesn't want to see them burn down another town again. So that's where we find ourselves in Northern California. It's a complicated crisis.
Yeah, we're going to keep monitoring these comments here, but we want to move to the next story. And for people that need power for medical reasons, this newest shutoff is not good news. It could literally be life-threatening. Tonight, ABC 10's Becca Habiger introduces us to one Nevada County resident who has to flag down people in order to get help.
This is my flashlight supply.
This 70-something Nevada County woman lives alone, and I'll let her introduce herself.
I say Charlotte like the spider and Alan like Woody.
Charlotte Allen is a self-described night owl, a schedule she kept after working the graveyard shift for 35 years as a nurse. But a power outage means more than just darkness.
My biggest problems are O2, and I use albuterol by nebulizer. And the nebulizer runs on the power.
If she can't run her nebulizer or her oxygen concentrator, breathing can be a challenge.
This delivers oxygen to me.
She was given this portable backup battery on Wednesday by local Aging and Disability Resource Center Freed. PG&E paid for and gave Freed 28 of these batteries for people who need electricity for medical purposes.
I need this when I sleep.
Alan is grateful for the battery, but it lasts about 12 hours. After that, the 85-pound unit will have to be taken somewhere to be charged.
Getting 85 pounds into the car may be a problem, but I have discovered that I'm very good at waiting for a car to come down the road and saying, "Help!" And most people are willing to help. It may take a man, but I'll just have to wait for a man and flag him down.
She's resourceful, but it's a problem she'd rather not have to face at all.
I really hope that Charlotte's doing well. Hopefully Becca Habiger, when she comes back, can just update us on kind of what's going on with her.
Yeah, and there are thousands of people in similar situations who really need this life-saving equipment for just everyday life. To say nothing of folks who have disabilities and have things like electric wheelchairs that they need to be able to charge. And when you start dealing with a shutoff that lasts the better part of a week, which we could be seeing in this particular circumstance, because PG&E just said in their press conference tonight that folks may not expect to have their power come back on between this shutoff and the next round on Tuesday and Wednesday of this coming week. So we've really got a long road for some of these things.
That's a little over a week for some of the people too.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider the fact that it can take 2-3 days to get the power back on, you could have people who've been shut off on Saturday that don't get it back until the following Friday. absolutely wild.
Yeah, we're also taking a look at the Kincade Fire. The Kincade Fire is the largest fire burning right now in our area. That's over in the Sonoma area. Tracking the Kincade Fire in Sonoma County, the latest update from CAL FIRE just a few minutes ago shows the fire is now at 54,000 acres. They've lost containment from 10 to 5%. 94 buildings have been destroyed. All evacuation orders are still in place tonight. And I see you're seeing some of those numbers on the side. Oh, we just got this a few minutes ago, so that's the reason why.
And these pictures are of the Soda Rock Winery in Healdsburg as it was burning down. It's a loss, the whole thing. We had our Carlos Herrera out there this morning while the flames were racing through all of those historic buildings. Here's what he filed for his report.
We're getting a closer look at what exactly is left from this fire here. This is the Soda Rock Winery, a historic landmark here in Healdsburg, right off of Highway 128, about 15 miles northwest of Highway 101. This building burned to the ground. You can see what's left of it. Well, simply the front wall at the entrance here, this old stone wall. You can see everything from the roof to furniture and everything else just burned to the ground. This is a historic landmark with structures really dating back to the 1860s. This was first a post office and a general store. Well, can't even making it hard for breathing here, as well as you see that thick plume of smoke billowing into the air. You can see some hot spots as well. This fire was fueled by embers moving southwest with that spot fire in this area. It happened around 4 a.m. with that wind moving this area southwest to this residential area. We've seen a lot of CAL FIRE crews rushing north and south along Highway 128, urging people who live in this area to get out. This area was earlier this morning under a evacuation warning, but now it's under a mandatory evacuation. Let's kind of walk out this way because the smoke in this air making it really difficult to breathe and even difficult to talk. You can even see the ash and debris on the ground, so it's also difficult to walk. So this is exactly what's making this fire so difficult to contain. The wind continues to blow here in this area. This is the front patio area, and you can see still some hot spots burning, but there are some crews here monitoring the situation, making sure that these embers don't fly along and don't cross Highway 128. Again, we've seen CAL FIRE crews driving up and down this road, making sure that every structure here is safe, pouring down some water, telling residents, you gotta leave as soon as possible. Highway 101 is only about 15 miles north or southwest of this, so people need to get out now. We know Highway 101 is somewhat congested with everyone trying to leave, so the time to leave is now, and you should heed this evacuation orders. For now, this is the very latest at the Soda Rocks Winery here in Healdsburg. We're sending it back over to you.
So I do want to go back to some of the numbers because on our Facebook, some people are asking about the most updated numbers. 54,000 acres have burned in the Kincade Fire. Containment is down from 10 to 5%. 94 structures destroyed, 80,000 structures threatened. And they're also talking about, they had this 24-hour window of favorable weather conditions from Monday to Tuesday where they're hoping to get a larger containment on this fire.
Yeah, and it's one thing I'll just talk about the numbers for a minute. We get these updates twice a day. That's pretty much how it's always worked in fire. You get a morning briefing and an evening briefing, and that's because they do 12-hour shifts working the fire. What tells you actually more is what they call fire behavior, and it sounds like the most boring part of the press conference, frankly, when they talk fire behavior is extreme. That's actually the thing I'm listening for, because that tells you how bad are the flames, right? And that's really what we care about in the moment right now. The containment figure, though, is really interesting, and you don't see containment go down a lot. That's an indication that the fire is behaving badly, that it's flared up bigger than they thought or were planning on for that next day. When it goes down from 10% to 5%, if you think of it, containment is basically just what they do is try to cut a line around the fire. My pen's not working, thanks.
We can see it, the circle,
So 10%, is basically we got a line around that much of the fire. They're basically saying they got half that now. So they've barely got anything around this fire is what they're telling you. And look, getting 5% containment, it's almost a meaningless distinction from zero, because there's one side of the fire that's not advancing, right? The part that's back against the wind, not a big deal. It's the head of the fire that we're worried about, right? And that's what's pushing the numbers up. It's now got a wider perimeter around that whole fire. And hence you've got less containment. It's grown bigger, and they don't have lying around more of it. That's the low, the high and low of that. We were talking about structures as well. We've about 20 more structures in this latest update that have burned down, and we understand the head of the fire, as I was just describing, where the active flames are, is pushing towards Windsor. That's a community a little bit north of Santa Rosa on 101. Our Lena Howland was there earlier today talking with the fire crews trying to contain the Kincade fire there. Here is what they had to tell her.
Talk to me a little bit about what we're seeing in this neighborhood.
So what we're seeing around here, we have many resources deployed. This is a structured defense group. The main body of the fire is approaching with the wind to our backs, and there is a firing operation at the Foothill Park, which is in between this subdivision and the main body of the fire. They're doing that to eliminate some of the fuels in between the main body of the fire and this subdivision, so that the main body of the fire will have less fuel to keep it pushing towards these homes. So what we're observing here is the structured defense group, and they are attempting to assess and protect as many homes as they can.
Okay, wow. And so I heard you talking about it earlier, saying, you know, we're gonna try to save everything we can.
So there are many different tactics that can be employed in a structured defense group that is made by the command staff on the ground here, and they're going to do what they can. They're going to maintain safety, but they're going to do what they can to save the property of the residents.
How are the winds playing a factor in your job right now?
So wind is a very strong influencing factor on wildland fire behavior. We've been experiencing a wind event since 0300 last night. Strong, sustained winds with gusts, and the wind event is having a strong impact on the fire behavior.
Wow. And has it kind of been more of a wildland fire up until this point?
I would say that there are areas of wildland urban interface. This is a classic example of wildland urban interface. We've also observed some wildland urban intermix areas and some true wildland areas. This fire is encompassing many different kinds of areas.
Okay. And can you describe what we're seeing out here? I see you've already laid down hoses right here.
Yes. So this is one of the tactics that's being used by this structured defense group, and they are preparing these homes to do their best job in defending them.
Okay. Anything else you can tell us about what we're seeing out here? Is there a big concern for this neighborhood?
We're always concerned for the lives and property and resources of the people of California.
All right, he wears the white helmet. That's why he gets to do the interviews. Appreciate that, Lena. You know, it's fascinating. I was talking with Lena earlier when she was there live, and she said there was a fire engine basically at every intersection in the neighborhoods as she was going through them in Windsor. And this is really telling. They're still losing homes there because literally you would have to have a fire engine on just about every property to guarantee you weren't going to lose one. That is why when they preach defensible space, they're not joking around. If they can't get to your house and effectively put it out really quickly, and you know your walls on fire when they get there, they're gonna have to kind of move on and worry about your neighbor's house, and that's just the way it is. They have to triage when they show up to these things. So I know we're getting some more comments. You had somebody who has a kind of rough situation.
Yeah, Sherry just commented, and I know a lot of people are reacting to this. She said, my husband is on oxygen 24/7. We have a portable oxygen machine that lasts 6 hours. I spent 2 hours at the CRC charging his machine while he waited at home airless. And then she goes on to say, meantime, he doesn't have air. Hope he makes it. Just heartbreaking to hear some of these stories.
Yeah, Sherry, I hope you're able to take care of that equipment, or perhaps move to a better location. Given what we're hearing from PG&E, would not be a bad idea if you've got a relative you can lean on, or somebody you can talk to in your county. One place I'll give a shout out to, if you're really just at a loss for places to go and these CRCs are not open long enough for you, that's Community Resource Center. That's what PG&E is calling basically their day shelters. They're not open all day and night. They're open from 8 to 8 in most locations. Look, if that's not enough for you, call 211 first thing in the morning. That'll connect you to county officials, their social workers. Tell them you need a place. They can try to plug you into Red Cross, somebody who might have a shelter where you can ride things out a little bit longer. You may even find yourself in a hotel room or something like that with a little bit of help. That's that's just one suggestion I've got for you, Sherry, but that's tough. Also, make sure that you are registered as a medical baseline customer with PG&E for future events, because you'll get extra notifications if you're not already, which I think is an important point. Most folks in that situation have done that, and we know that PG&E has thousands of them on their radar. It's quite possible they have people that are not on their radar who just plug in their machine and don't really think about that. So that's something to keep in mind. I've also got one from Merritt who says, what can we do as customers? I only have PG&E for gas in Sacramento, but how they update fees due to their mismanagement, what can we do at our state government helping them at a loss? What can we do? All right, Merritt, well, here's the thing. You're lucky enough to be a SMUD customer. So if you're worried about paying for PG&E's mismanagement, one option you've got is get rid of your gas appliances. I'm dead serious about that. If you can cap your gas meter, you don't have to pay PG&E a cent. They do make their rate cases as one joint proposal to the State Public Utilities Commission. So they basically walk up to the state and say, here are the rates for all of PG&E, gas and electric. Now, in theory, they're supposed to allocate the electric costs to the electric grid and the gas grid to, or gas. But it's a big, complicated, soupy mix of calculations that go into all of that, and it's basically PG&E comes and says we want to make this much money this year, and the state says yes or no, or we're going to reduce it to this much, and then that's what you end up with. So you can lobby them, you can write them, you can write your state representatives as well. I can guarantee you when the legislature comes back next year for their session, they're going to be taking a deeper look at PG&E and possibly more legislation. By all means, be a loud voice in that process, but if you want the practical thing, get rid of your gas appliances. If you don't want to pay PG&E, you don't have to pay them a cent.
Yeah, because honestly, I had the option of not going with PG&E at all with not having gas in my house.
Yeah, and for those not familiar with SMUD, that is a municipal utility. It's basically owned by the taxpayers here in Sacramento County. Rough Justice is their border. And that was a vote back in the 20s. PG&E fought it for 2 decades to keep it from happening, but it did end up prevailing in court, and that's what we have, and we pay less money than PG&E customers do here in Sacramento. A few other places have gone that way, and I know a lot more are taking a look at it after what's been going on this year.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're going to toss it over to Monica because she has an update on the winds, pretty much why we're here in the first place. Monica.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've been watching that Kincade Fire in particular. It grew today, unfortunately, and containment went down, meaning they have less of it under control. It actually grew on the southern fringe and just off to the west here. The red spots that you're seeing, those are actually actively burning right now. Kincade Fire is way up here, right around the Kincade Fire. They actually have everything contained, but then once those winds started to drive those embers all the way south and off to the west, it got awfully close to 101. Here's 101 right here, and you can see some of those hot spots getting awfully close to that highway for today. And again, it was all due to the winds that were fueling the flames and pushing that smoke off the coast pretty regularly throughout the day. Now, unfortunately, there was so much smoke coming from it. Look at the air quality at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Northern San Joaquin Valley, Stockton, Modesto, over towards the East Bay area for Livermore and Antioch, dealing with hazardous air quality. It was for a short period of time, but we had smoke coming in from the Kincade Fire, a couple of fires near Vallejo, a couple of grass fires that were coming in. It started to get dispersed a little bit better by about 5 o'clock, but through tonight, given that we still have those strong winds, don't be surprised if a spot fire picks up, and even if it's a grass fire, it could still mean a pretty smoky condition into tomorrow morning. Now, as far as what the winds were doing with the smoke, like I said, it was a pretty big plume heading right off the coast here through the Bay Area from the Kincade Fire. Those fires around Vallejo, also pretty much the same trajectory, pretty much off the coast, but those particles travel quite a distance. So we still had some dispersion all the way through the valley. So the Sunday smoke was definitely prevalent throughout the valley. For those of us that were in the Sacramento area, through Natomas, even, hey there, Brandon, even around the airport. I always forget.
Magic of the internet.
Yes. So around the airport, we had that smoke coming in from the fire along I-5. All right, now here's part of the good news is that we actually have our high wind warning. Many areas are actually out of that high wind warning now. This has changed just within about the last half hour. We're still going to keep it up here for the foothills, through Yosemite even, because that's where the big focus of energy is going to be. But the valley and even parts of the coastal valley now starting to see those winds back off. You'll see there's still some spots, though, that are going to continue to be under that high wind warning area with gusts over 60 miles per hour. Red flag warning, That's a much different story. That's going to continue through at least tonight into parts of tomorrow. Gusty winds, low humidity, and given that the fuel is still very dry, anything that starts can spread very quickly. All right, let's talk about those peak wind gusts for today. These are just a few that were pointed out. Alpine Meadows, 107 miles per hour. I usually talk about temperatures at 107, not winds. 70 for Jarbo Gap and 67 for Polga. Georgetown, 64, and Vacaville, 58. All right, so let's get to what the winds are doing right now, what they're going to do over the next 24 and even 48 hours, because as we've been talking about, we have a short window of opportunity to get the fires contained, get the mop-up done, check the power lines to get that power back on, because it looks like Tuesday, Wednesday, another wind event. All right, so here's where the winds are. The strongest winds right now are going to be in the foothills. And really what I want to point out is the colors up here on the map. We can take a look at the numbers, but that's just one particular reporting site. Really, the contours tell a much better story because it really starts to lay out the foundation of where we're seeing the widespread wind event, and it is currently in the foothills. Now, earlier today, really strong winds on the west side of the valley over towards the west side of the state with peak wind gusts exceeding 70 miles per hour. We even had some wind gusts over towards the Kincade Fire that were closer to about 100 miles per hour. But here's what happens. We're in this transition zone right now. Foothills really start to get most of the action here. The purple on this map, that indicates 50+ mile per hour wind gusts. And we're going to continue with those through at least midnight, through the foothills, and then we have a little bit of pop-up on the west side of the valley towards the coastal range by about midnight. Now, what you'll notice is that we get better relief over there on the west side of the valley, but until about 3 a.m., we're going to continue with those strong winds in the foothills, and then everything quiets down. Just as quickly as it ramped up, it quiets down again for Monday, and then we're right back at it. Now, one difference with this one that we're going to see, it's going to be more on the west side of the state through the Sierra foothills, 50 mile per hour winds in that 80-50 corridor, and then more so up towards Paradise and even higher up into the Sierra Valley. Over towards the coastal range, it's not going to be quite as severe. And the reason is the positioning of all the weather systems coming in across the west. And I'll show that to you in just a moment. First, here's what we saw for today. This is that 103 mile per hour wind gust that I was looking at over towards the coastal range, and compare that to what we were seeing over on the Sierra foothill side. A little bit lighter, but still really dangerous winds. 70 mile per hour peak wind gusts near Paradise, 73 there just to the south, and over towards Forest Hill as well. We were seeing some peak wind gusts upwards of 60 miles per hour. Now, this was the classic setup for today. Low pressure moved in to the desert southwest, pushed its way off the coast. High pressure moves into the Great Basin, creating those offshore winds. Those are very dangerous winds. Up here in the northern part of the state, we call them Diablo winds. Southern part of the state, Santa Ana winds. Any way you slice it, they accelerate through the hills. They're dry and warm with explosive fire growth. I was looking at the statewide view of how many fires are burning right now. Southern California just absolutely lit up late last week with those Santa Ana winds, and now we turn our attention to the northern part of the state. All right, so this is just a more detailed explainer, if you will. When we have that high pressure ridge over in the Great Basin, when those winds, they rise, they actually cool, but once they start to descend, they compress. And so this is where we get the very dangerous weather conditions right in here, because keep in mind, we haven't had rain for 4 months. So everything is just crispy and ready to go. Then we get into the valley. Those winds cool a little bit. It's not a whole lot, but then right after that, they're right back into the coastal range, and they have more acceleration, more drying, and they can be even more dangerous because they have a shorter gap there for compression. So they can become just devastating. Think about the North Bay fires with the Tubbs fire, how quickly those winds accelerated right through the hills. Okay, so here's the timeline of what we're seeing with a repeat of what I just showed you. Today we have the extreme fire weather, critical weather still tomorrow morning, and then everything quiets down. It's that 24-hour gap that we really need to take advantage of, because then we go right back into this. Now, it's not going to be quite as severe and widespread, but we certainly will see it on the west, on the east side of the valley here with critical fire weather Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday, and then we get some calmer weather Thursday and Friday. But here's the reason why I'm expecting this more on the eastern side of the state is this low right here is going to stay more to the east of us. It's not going to position itself off the coast like what we had over this weekend. Instead, it's going to create those stronger winds right in this area, say right around Paradise, and then moving through the Sierra Valley and the Sierra foothills as well. So the strong winds certainly returning, just not quite as much of a widespread event. So tonight, we'll still deal with extreme fire danger through the foothills, but then everything quiets down Monday midday through Tuesday. Look at this, though. We are right back at it. Tuesday afternoon. Look at how much of this map is covered by the potential for extreme fire behavior. Again, parts of the west side of the valley, but mostly a bigger stretch here through the eastern side of the state, including the eastern foothills. That's why PG&E is saying, I don't know how long we're going to be able to keep this power on. Some of us lost power just because of downed trees throughout the region. This one coming in from Fairfield Fire, you can see the damage this huge tree caused. And then this is out in Natomas where Karen's sending these in. Fence came down and there's the tree. I was seeing a whole bunch on Facebook and Twitter and even Instagram, people saying, oh my gosh, cars damaged. I mean, completely smashed. So if you have photos, you can shoot them our way. Weatherforce@abc10.com. We also have our text line open, 916-321-3310. Now tonight, again, for the valley, we're out of that high wind warning. Temperature-wise, it's going to be a cool evening. Winds are continuing to calm here. They'll still be about 10 to 15 miles per hour, but nothing out of the ordinary, really. It's not until we get into that next time frame there, Tuesday into Wednesday, that we really start to see things ramping up. So tonight, foothills, steady, strong winds for the valley, lighter winds, and then that next wind event heads our way into Tuesday and Wednesday, guys.
All right, Monica, appreciate the update. And we want to thank all of you who are watching on Facebook and all of you who are also asking sincere questions and making sincere comments. We want to thank you watching on YouTube. Not so much the people commenting on YouTube. Just watch. Don't look at the comments on YouTube. It's a scary place sometimes.
Yeah, very, very scary. Yeah, no. Yeah.
Not the place to argue about religion. Go do that somewhere else.
Somewhere.
Anyway,
yeah.
But we hope you guys are having a good night nonetheless.
Yeah, we want to go to Giacomo Luca. He's over on Highway 50, where there are some road closures because of down power lines. Giacomo, what can you tell us since we last went to you a few minutes ago?
Well, it looks like crews are continuing to get the work done. It's something that is taking quite a while. We know that traffic was backed up for a couple of hours. The good news right now is that there is traffic is being allowed in both the east and west lanes along Highway 50. At one point it was down to just one lane, and as you all know what it's like getting back and forth between Tahoe and Placerville, Tahoe, Sacramento. This area is typically pretty crazy with traffic because there's really only one way in, one way out. So fortunately, those lanes again being opened back up, but crews still spending their time trying to fix a down power pole, which brought lines down with it across Highway 50. They finally got the line up and out of the way. They've got a truck here that's holding that line up, but there's a couple of employees for PG&E that are out here trying to get this whole situation under control and restore that line to tip-top shape. We're just waiting on that right now, but we don't have any expected time on exactly when this is going to be repaired, but I'll try to get that to you as soon as possible. For now, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Giacomo, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for the update. It's good to hear traffic is getting a little bit better up there. That's fantastic. Pat wanted to know about fire behavior. She put fire behavior and a question mark. That is a firefighter term. It just means what is the fire doing, basically. And what the fire is doing is, well, if we're talking about the Kincade Fire, it's been a little rough out there. It's burning into Windsor and taking some houses there. That is where the head of the fire is. That behavior, as the firefighters would put it, is supposed to calm down heading into tomorrow. But the rough stuff is we've got more wind coming next week, so they might buy their way out of a day of danger tomorrow, but then it could be right on back. So, so that's a little rough. But
we're looking at the evacuation map too for the Kincade Fire. It's pretty crazy that it goes all the way to Bodega Bay. That's a huge landscape over
to the
there.
Pacific Ocean.
It's crazy.
It's the kind of thing we're frankly used to seeing out of Southern California from time to time, where the fires from the Santa Ana winds, as we've been hearing explained, burn all the way down to the coast. And here we're talking about the possibility, at least, of that out of this fire that started in Sonoma counties,
Yeah.
if you can believe it. So that's just, one example of how things are changing here. If you talk to the scientists who study our forests and fire behavior, they'll tell you that is what the models show. We expect Northern California to start behaving more like Southern California in the coming decades, generally speaking. And we're kind of getting a preview of it right now. So it's one of those things, people like to point at their favorite, scapegoat, if you will, or cause of why we're seeing what we're seeing. Climate change is one, and it is a factor, but there are a lot of other factors at play too. Not the least of which is, if you look up in the Sierra, we've got 100 years of putting out every fire that ever happened there, and we've just let it get overgrown, and now it's a tinderbox up there. And then people moved into it. A lot of them because it's too expensive to live down here.
Yep.
So it depends on the part of the state you take a look, and it is. You're absolutely right. Joseph says he agrees. Don't read the YouTube comments. I will say there was one fair comment on there. Somebody called me a clown for walking in front of Monica. That's fair. That's fair. I'll own that.
Oh.
I'll own that. But the people arguing about Satan and all the rest,
all
you're
that
like,
stuff.
you guys.
That they're blocking each other.
There are other videos you could do, but anyway, we appreciate those of you on Facebook who actually want to know what the heck's going on.
Yeah. Oh, someone asked if we could show the evacuation map. I don't know if
do we
we're
have
able
that in
to
the
show
booth?
that.
The evac map?
Yeah, the
we'll
evac
take a
map.
we'll
We'll take a look at that.
We're going to
we'll-
work on it. Jody, we're going to take a look and see if we can get that up on screen for you. We might have to do that
for the
in
Kincade
just
Fire,
a little bit here. Are we going to go to this Vallejo fire?
Yeah, we're
okay.
gonna-
Yeah, for those just joining us, this was a massive story earlier today. Started this morning. Vallejo had a fire, another one that burned down to the water, actually. Started near the Carquinez Bridge. If we go to some of the aerial videos that we have here, this shot by our partner station in KGO. These are the hills in Vallejo right near the Carquinez Bridge. Highway on I-80 was shut down in both directions. The bridge was shut down for hours. And if you just take a look at this video right here, this is what those flames were doing earlier today. Absolutely wild. And there is the highway, is right up next to it. In some of the shots, which you'll see coming up here, it almost looks like the bridge is involved in a couple of these shots. We can tell you it wasn't. Not significantly damaged. There's the toll plaza right there. That's the shot that I keep coming back to today. It's like anyone who's driven between Sacramento and San Francisco has seen this toll plaza, and that is how close the flames came to it. We've seen some video from down on the ground of that too. We might get to that in a little bit here.
The Cal Maritime Academy evacuated because the fire was so close, and we have seen it get very close to homes. On the other side of the bridge, there's a fire burning in Crockett, or it was burning. I don't know if it's still going on.
They got it pretty buttoned up, but they're going to have, there's the Cal Maritime Academy that
there
we're
we
talking
go,
about. And that's how close to the water it got right there.
Yeah, how crazy is that? I mean, we drive through that a lot if you want to go to San Francisco, and I've driven that dozens of times, but it's hard to imagine actually seeing that. Wow.
You see the smoke heading over the water. The bridge is kind of obscured behind it, but that actually shot embers over the water, and that is that spot fire that happened in Crockett. Reached 150 acres. They're posting up dozens of firefighters there tonight just to make sure that it doesn't get up and running again. It only was a few miles away from those oil tanks in Crockett where we had that oil tank fire just a couple weeks ago. So there, you can imagine the concern is you don't want this thing burning up close to those. Stayed a few miles away from those, but they got on it really, really quickly.
And 2 weeks ago, when I was covering that, the tank fires over there in Crockett, I was saying, we're not going to see 80 shut down like this. It's not going to happen again. And then 2 weeks later, part of it was shut down.
Here it is. And it's not a huge community, but the people who live in those little neighborhoods in Crockett, man, they've been through the ringer the last couple of weeks. They had to shelter in place because of the oil fire that you were covering, and then today they had a similar situation. So we had our Anastasia Bolton, who works at our sister station in Houston. She was in Vallejo giving us an update on the water emergency there caused by the power outage that was caused by that fire.
We are at the Vallejo Fire Station number 21. That's where the emergency operations center was set up this morning, and they just disbanded it later this afternoon. The reason why we're here are the emergency water restrictions for the city of Vallejo. It affects more than 100,000 residents. Why? Well, because the power is off, and the generators that clean that pump the raw water for treatment, they're not working. So the city is asking residents to conserve water. There is no outdoor watering, and in terms of indoor watering, limit that to a minimum. While the city is working with PG&E to restore power, there is no timeline at this point as to when that might happen. This is not a common event, according to the spokesperson for the city.
Not in the last several years. We haven't seen restrictions on water like this. We have had other major water main breaks where water has been impacted and people have been completely without water. And so we did kind of operate the EOC 4 years ago for the Broadway water main break. But that was about a quarter to a half of the community. So this is something that the city has experienced kind of on a different level. We've been able to support our residents in getting water back on and getting bottled water and those needs fulfilled. It's just a different event because of the power outage. So as soon as we can get raw water flowing again, we'll be able to treat it and turn it around very quickly.
The city says it is working on getting essentially a giant generator to help with the water treatment. But again, there is no timeline as to at least when the power will be back and when the residents here in Vallejo will be able to use water. So again, water restrictions are being enforced here in the city because of the power outage. Back to you.
All right. Yes. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
So we're going to go back to the comments because someone did ask about the evacuation map for the Kincade Fire, and we have it. I don't know if we're able to pop it up right out. There you go.
There we go. Yeah, and so take a look at that. So you're looking. I'm remiss. I think the red dots are showing us the fire activity. That seems to be what we're seeing, where there actually have been heat hotspots detected. So 101 is kind of around where that mouse cursor is. Rough Justice, right in the middle of it, where the edge of the fire is. That's Windsor, where we've been showing you some of the video of new houses being lost today. But the red area is the mandatory evacuation. So that goes all the way to the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
Fire started up where you see that old fire perimeter map, that dark red part. Thank you, whoever's running the mouse. I don't know. Who's that?
I don't know who that is.
Oh, it's Izzy. Awesome.
Okay.
So yeah, that is the original fire perimeter. They update those, periodically, and then we've also got that heat detection on here. And then, that dark red, just general big area, that is the mandatory evacuation zone. So when we say 180,000 people, that's what we're talking about. That's what it looks like on a map. It's pretty wild. And then I believe those. The orange areas there are kind of folks on standby right now.
That's a large area.
So, you got thousands more. I mean, that encompasses Santa Rosa. That's like not a small place. It's almost 200,000 people in Santa Rosa. They've evacuated the hospital there. That happened in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
inmates
inmates had to be transferred too. I heard about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. When institutions have to evacuate, it's pretty wild. And you got to think, the hospital in Santa Rosa is very likely a little bit bigger than the one in Paradise. And I talked to folks who were involved in that evacuation. Just out of this world what it took to get it done. Seems like they pulled the trigger a little bit earlier in Santa Rosa, so that's good. They saw kind of the writing on the wall. We saw the wind forecasts, and they got out ahead of it. Also in the comments here, we've got Jenny, who says the positive thing about this is that we'll have an outcome of a healthy forest. Not necessarily, Jenny. I've worked on this topic a lot. I actually have spent a lot of time talking with the chief ecologist for the U.S. Forest Service for all of the state of California. He's actually in the region, which also covers Hawaii. We won't get into that, but he basically has shown me places. We've gone out and looked in the field, and you can see it in our series, Fire, Power, Money. You can find that at firepowermoney.com. It's in the first episode. You go to a burn area, and you look at it years later, and there aren't trees coming back. When you get, and this is particularly a problem in the Sierra, it's a little bit different when you get down into the brush. I mean, that's sort of stuff that replaces itself and it's just always going to burn, right? But you get up into the forest and where you have these evergreen trees, and a lot of them just get replaced by brush. And then those become more dangerous because they grow, they die, they can burn a lot quicker than trees can. So in order to get a healthy forest back, it actually takes a lot of human intervention right now. People have to go out there and plant saplings because what happens in some of these really hot fires, like what we saw in Paradise, and what we've seen in Redding, for instance, it'll burn every pine seed for miles. And so the trees just simply cannot come back. So what comes back in its place is brush. So it's true that the areas that burn right now will be safer for a small period of time in the short term because, firefighters love to look for what they call fire history. That just means blackened areas that have burned already before because that's a little bit safer for the time being. But that's a temporary thing. That goes away after a while. Eventually, stuff grows back and it may not be what was there before. And some of what we're seeing is forests being lost in parts of California. If you want an example that we highlight in Firepower Money, you drive down Highway 50 into Lake Tahoe, the Angora fire, which was like 12 years ago. You can see the ridge as you're coming down, and there aren't trees there anymore. You know, there's forests on all sides of it, but there's a big bald patch, and all of that is just brush that's coming back in that place. So it's a complicated problem, the fire problem here in California. Anyway, we appreciate your comments. By all means, please come on in here. But and Jenny also saying, you know, Cali's my home and been all over NorCal, shocked and saddened. I think a lot of people are feeling that. You grew up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I grew up in San Jose.
We both grew up in Northern California.
This is not normal. It is that new normal. I hate to use the cliche. It is like kind of a cliche by now, but it really is. This is where we're in a different fire environment, and people are at more danger than they think they are.
Yeah,
in a lot of these places.
Oh yeah, so we want to go over to what we call Team Boise. Our Joey Prechtel, did I say that right? Was in downtown Placerville.
You got it, Prechtel.
Oh, I did, okay.
Yep.
A community that's been without power since yesterday.
Yeah, this is the third shutoff for this community inside of a month. Here's what he found when he went there.
Downtown Placerville is really split into two different sections today. You have businesses on one side of the street that are in the dark due to the PG&E Power Shutoffs, but then businesses just on the other side of that very same street have their power and they're open today.
Millie the meerkat?
The Bookery is one of those stores in the dark, as customers used flashlights to look through books they wanted to buy.
Book shopping by flashlights, pretty rad.
That's Allison Bendel. She came to Placerville with her family after their original plans fell through.
So we came to go on the train rides up in Shingle Springs. They do like a Sunday train ride, but they weren't doing it because of the weather and the power outages.
And the Bookery is one of her favorite stores. Darren Coelho runs it.
Business has been down pretty significantly on the days that we've had no power.
While one side of the street is in the dark, the other is far from it.
One side of the street has underground lines because the government buildings are on that side. This side of the street has above ground lines. So that side is able to tap into generators that our city has.
So while the Bookery is running in the dark, other stores like Man Cave Placerville do have power. But one thing is weird about this store having power. It's on the same side of the street as the Bookery. Todd Pickett, the owner, says this is different than the last time PG&E shut off power on Thursday.
We didn't have power then, and then 2 weeks before that, we didn't have power. So we've been out, and then the city's been doing some things to help the businesses.
Both stores hope these power shutoffs become a thing of the past, since it's hurting their bottom line overall.
This street's lost thousands, if not millions of dollars. The restaurants have lost food. People aren't coming down. People aren't going up for Apple Hill. So it's costing us millions of dollars.
I talked with a rep from PG&E earlier today. He was at the Community Resource Center here in Placerville. He told me that the community can expect to have the all clear tomorrow morning starting at 6 o'clock. However, that does not mean that the power will come right back on at 6. All that means is that crews from PG&E will start going out, inspecting the power lines, checking for damage, checking to see if it's safe to turn that power back on. Back to you.
All right, so Joey is showing us the impact on some of the businesses there losing money because of this. This has been a really big sticking point between the governor and PG&E. Now, the governor, I have to point out, took money from PG&E towards his election campaign, but since these power shutoffs started happening earlier this month, he's seen the anger out there, and he's been blasting PG&E. He said he wanted a $100 credit on everyone's bills who was affected in that earlier shutoff earlier this month. He wants more compensation, I would imagine, for these shutoffs that we're seeing right now. PG&E is saying they're not going to do that. They view this as a weather event, but the bottom line is they are shutting down such large chunks of Northern California because they have high tension power lines that should not be failing in the wind, and they have a history of failing in the wind. In fact, that is something we are looking at because of this fire in Sonoma County. There is CAL FIRE tape around the base of one of their towers right now as fire investigators are taking a look at it for a very similar issue with a jumper cable, which is what we saw in the campfire that PG&E does not dispute. They admit they started that fire.
Yeah, when we're talking about like a lot of money, businesses losing money, some mayors are trying to come together in that Nevada County area, trying to see if they could kind of work out a 0% loan for some of these businesses to get, just to help get just get back up again because they've lost so much money because of
if
this.
you're operating
Yeah.
on thin margins, absolutely. I mean, but then the bottom line is, a lot of people run their households on thin margins too. And if this is your second refrigerator full of food that you just restocked after the last one at your own expense, I mean, what do you tell those people?
And also for, we say like, oh, there may be a generator, you can get some generators, but for a lot of these people, generators are expensive. It's not just like $10. They cost a lot.
Yeah, and it's not like a solution to power your whole house either. I mean, you can get a whole house generator. That's absolutely an option for folks, but I mean, that's a much more expensive thing. If you go down to, like a Harbor Freight or whatever and spend $100 to $300 on a generator, you're not gonna run your whole house, right? Maybe you go out and charge your cell phone and have to like basically listen to the sound of a lawnmower running in your ear all the time.
Yeah.
It's not like pleasant living.
No.
All right, we want to get to some school closures. We understand we have quite a few of these to talk about.
We have a long list of them. I don't know if we have a graphic or I'm just going to list. I think I'm going to list all of them. So the following schools are closed Monday. On Monday, that's tomorrow. Black Oak Mine Unified School District, all schools. Camino Union School District, all schools. EDCOE Main Campus. CDCOE, is that El Dorado? Yeah, so it's El Dorado Charter Alternative Programs, El Dorado Union High School District, Gold Oak Union School District, Gold Trail Union School District, Latrobe Union School District, Motherlode Union School District, Placerville, Pioneer Union, Pollock Pines Elementary School District, Rescue Union School District as well. I'm wondering if we can get a graphic of this and then maybe we can put it into one of our Facebook comments so people can just read it when they're going through some of our Facebook Live as well, because it might be a little bit easier instead of me just kind of reading all of it.
And there's another thing, right there that's an impact of this. I mean, you got people have to figure out childcare now, so like this is like, it's funny because I worked in Colorado for the last 7 years. I've been here for a year now at ABC 10, but I was at our station in Denver for the previous 7 years, and people asked me about growing up in California, and you didn't have snow days, right? I'm like, no, we didn't. We got all our snow days in the '89 earthquake, because they had to go inspect all the schools to make sure they were safe. And kids are getting their version of that out of the PG&E shutoffs, which is just wild to think about.
Because so I worked in Virginia before I came back home, and when we worked in Virginia, they had those snow days that were built into the calendar. But I'm wondering for these school districts what they have built in and how they make up for some of their curriculum as well.
They may end up, I mean, that's what places with snow days do. They end up having to do makeup days and make a longer school year. So it messes up like a lot of things for people, which is, there's going to be trickle down effects from this for a long time to come. And this isn't the last shutoff, by the way. We're expecting another round of blackouts just in the name of fire prevention by PG&E Tuesday and Wednesday this next week. And they're telling some folks may not get their power turned back on in between the two. So this could be a week-long thing for some of these folks.
Very long week.
More than 30 counties that next round. I think it was 32.
I think it was 32, that's what I read,
So. All right. Hey, we're going to go to Monica right now, who's going to give us an update on the winds. I know we were worried about a shift up to the foothills from those coastal ranges. Is that still playing out?
Yeah, you're right about that. I have a feeling you guys are going to get comments, though, about the school closures. The places that have school closures also have snow days. That's
true. That's true.
Oh, yeah.
Depends how high up you are, right?
I know. They're probably like, how are we going to make up all these days? We had fire, we had snow, so who knows what the winter will bring.
You are spot on.
I know. So there, see Facebook friends?
She's confident.
I'm right there with you. Coming from Indiana, I know a thing or two about snow days.
Fair.
All right. Peak wind gusts here. Alpine Meadows over 100 miles per hour. We talk about Yarborough Gap, Polga by the Campfire, Paradise near 70 miles per hour. Georgetown 64 and Vacaville at 58. So here's a look at what the current winds are. They have started to back off just a bit through the valley and the west side of the valley, down to about 15 to 25 miles per hour. That's not terribly out of the ordinary when we have a weather system to come through, but earlier today we had much stronger gusts. But the areas that are now kind of the focus is just north of Highway 50 and through that 80-50 corridor stretching all the way towards Yosemite here, and that's where we really are seeing the potential for strong winds even through tonight. So again, earlier today, big focus of energy was on the west side of the state with peak wind gusts over 60 miles per hour. Many areas had 70+ mile per hour wind gusts as well. The foothills, we're just kind of starting to get into the action here, and it will continue deep into tonight. Unfortunately, since we had the stronger winds on the west side of the valley and towards the coastal valley area where the Kincade Fire is burning, had a lot of explosive growth on the southern perimeter of this. Here's the Kincade Fire way up here where you're seeing some of these red circles. Those are active fire areas that we detect through satellite. Look at how close it got to 101. So that's why they had to shut down that road for a period of time so they could try to get better containment and not have that jump the road. That's what happened with the Tubbs fire. It jumped 101 because the winds were so fierce. All right, so here's a look at the smoke, and you can see how it was just billowing out today towards the coast. That doesn't mean that we weren't affected by some of this smoke. In fact, we had so many of those small fires burning today, grass fires in and around the Sacramento area, even towards Highway 50. And then we had a fire in Vallejo that shut down I-80 for a period of time, plus the Kincade Fire, where you see some of the purplish areas. That was the hazardous air, and that was concentrated in Stockton, Modesto, even farther into the northern San Joaquin Valley and towards the East Bay, Antioch, and Livermore. Then we headed into about the 5 o'clock hour when things really started to improve, primarily because winds were shifting ever so slightly, and we started to see more concentrations of that smoke really pushing off the coast. But again, fine particulate matter still kind of caught up in the atmosphere. So just be aware, we're probably going to have to deal with that for a little bit longer. And tonight, we still may see some of those spot fires developing, especially where we have this high wind warning in effect. That's going to be in the foothills, 80-50 corridor, again, stretching towards Yosemite, where we saw some of those contours, those colors on the map showing some still pretty strong gusts. And over towards the Bay Area, especially the coastal hills, we'll still have that wind warning in effect through tonight. All right, red flag warning, that's going to extend through a much larger area because everything's so dry. So even with the lightest bit of wind, say 15, 20 miles per hour, something could spread very quickly. So we'll continue with this for a little bit longer. All right, let's take a look at what the winds are going to do for tonight. Now, they are starting to back off for the valley. We talked about that. But as we head towards midnight, just a little bit of a ramp up here on the west side of the valley. So say Lake County, Colusa, even into Yolo and Solano. A bit of a ramp up for the winds there, even Sonoma as well. But really, I mean, you can see it yourself here. I really don't need to point this out. You can see all the purple up here on the map. Those are 50+ mile per hour winds. And that's at midnight. So we're still deep into this at midnight, even into about 3 o'clock in the morning, where we'll still have some areas that are seeing gusts over 50 miles per hour. By tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., pretty much right back to normal. Winds about 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then we get into Tuesday. And here we go again. Now, this will be potentially stronger wind gusts over on the east side of the state, especially for the eastern foothills. Today, what we basically had was that low moving off the coast, high pressure building into the Great Basin, creating what we typically see, those offshore winds that we call Diablo winds or Santa Ana winds. It's a pretty typical pattern, especially for this time of year, as we start to see that transition zone. More lows moving out of the Gulf of Alaska, out of Canada, trying to press our way, bringing us the potential for rain and snow. This time of year, though, if it meets up against that high, it has a tough time breaking through it, and it can create those strong offshore winds. And we are seeing every bit of evidence that that's happening right now. They accelerate through the hills, they dry, they warm, and can create explosive fire growth. We saw that late last week in Southern California, where dozens of homes were burned down. Now, let me put it into more of a 3D mode, if you will, when we draw it out here. Here's the Great Basin high, and we have those winds here coming up over the Sierra Nevada. Now, that's going to be the east side of the Sierra Nevada. Here's the west side, the windward side. They warm and dry, but you can see we have a pretty long range here down to the Sacramento Valley, where they'll once again start accelerating up as we go into the coastal range. But since this is so compact here, we really compress that air. It's dry, it's warm, and they can accelerate at such a rapid pace. We're talking over 100 miles per hour. And it looks like a similar pattern will develop Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday. We'll get about a 24-hour break here. Monday afternoon through about Tuesday afternoon. That's going to be the time frame that all hands on deck trying to get better containment of that Kincade fire, because the biggest dangerous wind event that is going to be moving off to the east. But here comes this low diving in once again in competition with that high. It's just that this one stays a little bit farther to the east. That's why the eastern side of the state potentially will have slightly higher fire danger. So as far as the fire danger for tonight, it's going to stay contained primarily in the foothills for the extreme level. And then tomorrow we really start to back off, which is great news, a time frame that we hope to get more people on with power on. And then by Tuesday, look at what happens here. We are right back at it, all the way through the valley, the foothills, and especially on the west side of the valley, say Fairfield, Vacaville, even towards Vallejo just a bit. But Woodland, Davis, all in that very concentrated extreme fire danger. Not to mention just the fact that we have damage out there. Trees down, branches down. This is from Fairfield Fire. I know I saw a couple of posts out there, either on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, of cars that were damaged by trees. Just real destruction here. This is in Natomas. Karen sending these in to us. Thanks so much to our weather force at abc10.com. You can also text us, by the way. The number is 916-321-3310. So for tonight in the valley, a little bit quieter. It is going to be quite cool out there, though. Lows will be dropping into the 40s and right about 50. And get this, we've got a couple of days out there in the coming week where lows will actually be dropping into the 30s. So we've got quite a transition period here. If we're not seeing the rain, we're starting to feel the cooler weather. So heading into tonight, foothills, steady, strong winds for the valley, lighter winds, and then that next event starts to head our way by Tuesday. I'm going to hopefully get some images, Ananda and Brandon. I'm going to go try to get some video of nighttime fire video where you can see a time lapse of the Kincade fire.
Oh.
Yeah, where, you know, it's really dark and you can see just the glimmer of fire.
It was so scary. We saw that this morning. I don't know which camera I'm looking at, but I saw that this morning with Rob from 1 to 4 a.m. and it was scary to see that glow, how bright it was, even from far away from those cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah. They settle down at night, but that doesn't mean they're doing nothing.
I'm grabbing my cohort, Tracy Humphrey. I'm going to show her how to import that video. She's been wondering, so hopefully we'll have that up pretty soon.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right, we'll look for
thanks,
that.
Monica.
Appreciate it. Okay. We are going to go to something special, I believe, right now. Izzy, do we know what we're doing real quick with Firepower Money? Okay. So I worked for the better part of a year with my team on ABC 10 Originals on a series called Firepower Money that breaks down the elements behind this crisis, the shutoff crisis that we're seeing and the fire crisis as well. It's called Firepower Money. Those are the three elements we chose to focus on. And it really does tell the story behind how we got to this moment, behind why we have 3 million people sitting in the dark here in the wealthiest state and the wealthiest nation in the world right now. Firepower Money, again, breaks down into those three elements. You can find all three episodes right now. There's one episode per element, an episode for fire, an episode for power, and an episode for money. We are going to show you episode 2 because that is spot on the nose about this power crisis that we're dealing with right now. I know so many people have questions about PG&E and holding them accountable right now and what's really going to happen in the end with them. This is the episode that really delves into those, but the whole story is worth learning. The fire episode goes into what's happening with our forests. The money episode goes into how this is going to cost all of us here in the state of California. But since we have so many people dealing without power, we are going to show you right now episode 2, Power of Firepower Money. Take a look.
California's in the middle of a burning crisis. It threatens our lives. It threatens the air we breathe. It also threatens our way of life. Many of the deadliest fires are caused by our electric grid. The nation's largest electric utility, PG&E, went into bankruptcy because of fires it caused. Beyond health and safety, this crisis is about whether the lights come on for tens of millions of people. No matter what, it won't be cheap. This is going to cost all of us, even if you don't live on PG&E's turf, even if you don't live in California. The crisis can seem too big and complicated to grasp, but it really does smolder down to just 3 basic elements: fire, power, money. We'll give each element its own episode in this series. My name's Brandon Rittiman. As a journalist, I've covered countless wildfires. I've been certified as a wildland firefighter, and I've got more than a decade of experience covering politics. I'm here to take you through every part of this mess so all of us can understand it, not just the insiders. This is Fire, Power, Money, California's burning crisis and how it's going to cost us all. power. It comes in many forms, but every kind of power gives us the same thing: the ability to make things happen. Electric power makes the lights come on. It's a basic need for modern life, and that gives electric companies another kind of power: economic power. They have huge monopolies, forcing people to do business with them. In California, that economic power's been abused, and the political power hasn't been able to fix it. Power helped get us into this mess, but it's an element we'll need to harness to force our way out.
Sadness, hopelessness sometimes, you start all over.
Robin Souza, the campfire survivor living in a trailer on her friend's side yard, says she gets nightmares. It's hard not to think about the fire, the escape from the flames, the people who didn't. She knows one person who died in the fire. She lost her home.
Me and a group of people of the Samaritan's Purse went up there to sift through the ashes, and we did find a couple of things.
She loved that house. Robin and her husband, who didn't feel up to talking with us, worked hard on it.
I don't want anyone else to go through this.
We heard this from a lot of survivors, and a lot of them are suing PG&E. The company says it had a worn hook on this power line, the line the state says started the campfire, a finding PG&E does not dispute.
They seem to have admitted, at least to some degree, that there was faulty equipment there, and it doesn't sound like they took the proper procedures. Would anyone else in that situation, if it wasn't PG&E and they did something like that, would they be accountable?
We know a thing or two about what accountability looks like with PG&E. If it feels like we've seen this movie before, it's because PG&E's got a rap sheet. People don't trust it, and they can point to serious reasons why. Survivors like Robin want to know if there will be accountability. Yes, they want compensation from PG&E. Yes, there's a cottage profession of wildfire attorneys working to get it for them. But the victims also want to know if someone in a position of power out there is going to make PG&E change its ways. The answer is a fascinating story of its own. There's a convicted felon living here in San Francisco. This is a criminal who's never spent a night behind bars. That's despite the fact the state says they started wildfires that killed 107 people the last 2 fire seasons. This criminal isn't a person, it's the Pacific Gas and Electric Company, a multi-billion-dollar corporation with a monopoly over 4 out of 10 people living in California. On the map, PG&E looks like this. That's the turf of its monopoly, from Bakersfield almost all the way up to Oregon. They cover an area the same size as Oklahoma. It's got the population of 4 Oklahomas. 16 million people have no choice but to get their power from this company. If you granted it statehood, PG&E would be the 5th most populated state in the nation, just behind New York. So, what happens when a company that powerful commits a crime? The law tells us corporations are people, that they're to be treated just like you or me, but that's just not true. Cameras are banned from federal courtrooms when court's in session, but we can still show you how it really works in here. This is the story of 2 criminals. This is Carl, and this is PG&E. Both committed the exact same crimes. At this point, juries found both of them guilty. Now it's time for the judge to hand down their sentences. Carl's in a prison jumpsuit because he's facing up to 30 years in federal prison. PG&E came to court wearing a bunch of suits. Executives and a small army of lawyers are really all you see at the defendant's table when a corporation goes to court. When the jury in PG&E's case went to deliberate, the court told them, under the law, a corporation is considered a person, and all persons are equal. That sounds nice, but it's not true. In reality, PG&E has a superpower no human criminal does, an automatic get-out-of-jail-free card. If the charges are against the company, but not specific people in the company, the handcuffs and the prison bars simply disappear as options for punishment. To be clear, PG&E committed 6 federal felonies, which absolutely do qualify for prison time. If Carl committed those same crimes, legal experts say he'd probably get 5 to 10 years in federal prison. But it could be as much as 30 years if the judge found the case serious enough to throw the book at him. PG&E's crimes did come from something serious. 8 people died when a big PG&E gas pipeline split, blowing up an entire neighborhood in San Bruno. Prosecutors argued PG&E purposely used bad safety data to save itself money by doing less expensive safety work than it should have. The jury found PG&E guilty of 5 counts of willfully breaking federal safety laws and 1 count of obstruction for misleading federal investigators about it after the disaster. Remember, for all those crimes, PG&E could get no prison time. What they did get was the maximum fine of just $3 million and the maximum alternative to prison, up to 5 years probation. The judge did come up with some creative probation terms. He made PG&E spend another $3 million to run this ad on TV.
On September 9th, 2010, PG&E learned a tragic lesson we can never forget. This gas pipeline ruptured in San Bruno. We are deeply sorry.
And PG&E had to get a monitor. Not one of those. PG&E's monitor is a guy named Mark, former federal judge Mark Phillip. PG&E also got 10,000 hours of community service, which it's still working on, but we know PG&E did 82 hours of that service helping at a charity golf tournament. The charity told us none of PG&E's volunteers played golf. Still, the fact is PG&E got to serve some of its time on a golf course and none of it in a prison cell. But a corporate criminal's superpowers don't stop there. Let's suppose the judge decided to go easy on Carl, the human criminal, and give him probation too, a second chance to turn his life around. Probation is supposed to keep offenders on a leash. Stay on your best behavior, don't break the law, or you get dragged right back into court for more punishment. If Carl slips up during probation, he's going to prison, but not PG&E. It actually did violate its probation in this case, but the judge still doesn't have the option of prison. All he could do was add more terms to PG&E's probation, but PG&E still gets to walk out of court and into the free world, a world where it has a massive monopoly to sell the electricity we all need.
While an apology alone will never be enough, actions can make PG&E safer.
After San Bruno, PG&E's court-ordered apology ads on TV promised action.
We can never forget what happened in San Bruno. That's why we're working every day to make PG&E the safest energy company in the nation.
Words are not enough, PG&E wrote in a statement after the sentencing. We expect to be judged by our actions. So how did PG&E act after walking out of that court? 9 months after the judge sentenced the company to probation, the state says PG&E Power Equipment started 17 fires in Northern California. Those fires killed a combined 22 people.
The house is burned down. Friends, family. You just take what you can and leave, or you stand and fight.
As lawsuits poured in from the survivors of those fires and the loved ones of the dead, PG&E did take action. The company blocked all the lawsuits by declaring Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Bankruptcy automatically freezes all lawsuits against PG&E, forcing victims and survivors to come to the negotiating table to try to settle. What else did PG&E, this company that wants to be judged by its actions, do? They committed more crime, according to prosecutors. Can you point me to the crime in that photo?
The crime here is this right here, which is the branch that was over here, over these lines.
Mike Ramsey's been the prosecutor in Butte County for more than 3 decades. The year before the Camp Fire burned down Paradise, he says, PG&E power lines started this, the Honey Fire. a small 150-acre fire that burned no homes down.
Hundreds of people are affected. No homes have been lost to the flames, thanks in part to neighbors who dragged out their own backyard garden hoses and went to work protecting their own property.
This branch in the wind came down, brought the power lines down to the ground and started the fire. That's a failure to maintain a distance around an energized power line.
And that's a misdemeanor.
That is a misdemeanor.
State law requires power companies to keep trees trimmed back a safe distance from power lines, generally 10 feet or so. But Ramsey says they're also supposed to trim back obvious problems like branches hanging over the lines. How slam dunk do you feel like that case is based off of what you just pointed out on that picture?
We felt it was fairly slam dunk, and we felt it was very provable, and we let PG&E know that.
The crime Butte County alleged only carried a punishment of $1,000. But because PG&E is an offender on probation, a new criminal case might have cost them a lot more. As PG&E explained to its own investors after the trial, the probation includes a requirement that PG&E not commit any local, state, or federal crimes during the probation period. What PG&E didn't tell investors is that it also had to report new legal problems to its probation officer within 72 hours. But when Butte County started investigating PG&E for criminal charges for starting the Honey Fire, the company didn't go to its PO. Prosecutor Mike Ramsey says PG&E talked to him to try to get out of being charged.
They had asked to come up and talk with us about it and see if there was something that could be done absent a criminal conviction.
Over the course of months, we repeatedly asked PG&E to make its leaders available to answer our questions for this series on camera. They refused every time. Ramsey says a team of PG&E lawyers came to his office. They tried to convince him that he didn't have the evidence. That's when he says he brought it up.
You're a federal felon on probation, at which point the room got silent, and then we said, okay, now that we know what our bases are, why don't we start talking about something substantially more than $1,000.
Butte County ended up settling its criminal investigation of the Honey Fire for a civil agreement. Butte County agreed not to charge PG&E for the $1,000 crime in exchange for $1.5 million. Knowing what you know now about PG&E, do you have any second thoughts about how you settled this?
Actually, no. I mean, because what we want, we still want something that protects the people of Butte County.
Ramsey says a $1,000 conviction wouldn't do a lot for Butte County, but the $1.5 million is going to hire people to do safety inspections of PG&E's lines there for the next few years.
To purchase line inspectors, governmental line inspectors, just to help them out.
Butte County was getting ready to hire 4 new firefighters to do those inspections when it hit. Just 1 month after PG&E settled with Butte County, the Camp Fire burned a huge piece of the county down, killing dozens of people. It was the deadliest fire in California history. 85 people died. The state says this power line started it, owned by PG&E, the federal offender who just negotiated its way out of facing charges. So some people are going to take the dim view and go, well, you let them buy their way out of a crime.
Actually, no, because the federal judge, as somewhat expected, did find out about it.
When federal judge William Alsop found out, he branded PG&E a probation violator for failing to tell its probation officer about the settlement. As punishment, the judge ordered PG&E's new CEO, Bill Johnson, and its board of directors to take a field trip. Go to paradise. See the destruction the Camp Fire caused for yourselves. This is a rare photo of that field trip. The corporate leaders of PG&E went to paradise unannounced. That's Judge Alsop outside of his courtroom rolling along with them. Inside his court, Judge Alsup also expressed frustration at the company and the political system that regulates it. He was upset PG&E paid billions to shareholders that should have gone to trimming trees instead. So he banned PG&E from paying dividends to investors until it proves its improved safety. And we weren't allowed to film it, but I watched Judge Alsup in his courtroom blasting state regulators. How did so many fires occur under your regulation? That's what the people of California deserve to know. How did that happen? He asked. We'll show you how PG&E influences state leaders in charge of keeping it safe, and we'll ask the governor why it was right to take campaign money from PG&E after it was convicted of crimes. Next.
All right, for those just joining us, you've been watching episode 2 of our series, Fire, Power, Money. It breaks down the elements behind this crisis that we're seeing right now, but we're also going to continue to update you on how that crisis is playing out here in Northern California right now, because we're following breaking news all day long. We've got 3 million people without electricity right now. PG&E has shut off the power to those people on purpose to prevent causing more wildfires. You've been hearing about the problem there. But we also have fires burning all across the state, including one where there are questions right now about whether a PG&E power line may have been the cause. 180,000 people are evacuated right now, all the way out to the Pacific coast because of the Kincade Fire tonight, and we have no idea when they're going to get to go home and on it.
Yeah, and those historic winds pushing the flames into neighborhoods, threatening some of the same communities that burned in the North Bay fires 2 years ago. We've seen fires from coast to the valley to the Sierras, and those power shutoffs could go on for days, possibly into late next week.
Yeah, there are still more than 3 million people without power. That number actually jumped today by 100,000 power meters. So that's, 300,000 people got added into this mess today. These are customers across 38 counties who don't have electricity right now. That is the biggest PG&E preventative power shutoff blackout, if you want to call it that, ever. Even bigger than those massive shutoffs that were unprecedented that we saw just 2 weeks ago. Keep in mind, I was just explaining, a customer, when PG&E talks about the number of customers, that's not one person, that's one power meter. Cal OES says we've got about 3 people on average per power meter in this state. That means millions of Californians are without power right now. We're north of 1 million customers, power meters if you want to go there. That means 3 million people. PG&E is expecting more shutoffs, another round to start on Tuesday. They're telling people that are affected by these shutoffs right now that they may not get the power switched back on before that next round hits Tuesday and Wednesday. So it's conceivable, yes, people could be without power for an entire week in some places.
Yeah, and like we said, fires burning across the state. A fire in Vallejo closed down I-80. You've probably seen those crazy videos over near the Carquinez Bridge. Another over near Natomas closed I-5 in both directions, and fires have popped up all across Northern California. I feel like I've been going through my Twitter feed and seeing so many more.
Yeah, that fire started around 9 this morning in Vallejo, and it's also caused problems besides just shutting down I-80 in both directions, which was for hours today, including the Carquinez Bridge shutdown that you were just talking about. It also burned portions of the Cal Maritime Academy right against the water there. The flames literally burning right down to water's edge. We thought that the bridge might have been part of the fire. Yeah. There were some of these angles where you couldn't tell. Is the bridge actually involved? And you can see the fire is on both sides of the highway in this shot right here. Anyone who's taken the drive to San Francisco from here in Sacramento knows exactly what we're looking at right here. This is that bridge that you go over. It jumped over the water. So it actually, spanned the same stretch of water that bridge does, spotted a fire in Crockett. That was 150 acres. That's been tamped down. Anastasia Bolton, an old colleague of mine who's flown in here from Houston, she was at that spot fire. Now she's over in Vallejo where we've got water restrictions as a result of this. How do we get from fire to water problems, Anastasia?
So what happens is the folks in Vallejo explained to me is that the fact that the power is turned off, not exactly where I'm standing, and I'll explain why I'm here in just a second, but at least 40% of Vallejo doesn't have any power, and because of PG&E power outages or turning off the power, as you've mentioned, they are unable to treat raw water, so that goes into people's homes, and so they are asking, the city of Vallejo is asking all of its residents, which is more than 100,000 people, to restrict their water usage. What does it mean? You cannot water outside, they're saying, and you have to limit your use of water inside. That means shower, flushing the toilet, doing the dishes, all of that. How long that's going to go on? Well, they're not able to say yet because they're waiting for PG&E to turn on the power. So why am I here? It's an interesting combination of driving through here, just a few miles away, there is no power for neighborhoods on end. But here, this is an amusement park. And there are people, I could hear them screaming, having fun. Obviously, you can see lights on and things are working. We are in an area where there are lights. So across the street from this particular amusement park are fairgrounds for the city of Vallejo. And on the property of the fairgrounds is a cell phone charging booth or a tent, whatever you want to call it. And people have been coming to that area, to the tent across the way from the amusement park to charge their cell phones. Because again, if you go a couple of miles in either direction, it is completely dark. So dark, no water for the foreseeable future. Vallejo saying that, listen, we're trying to get a large generator so we can process the water, the raw water into people's homes. But again, no timeline for when that might happen. So darkness and a little bit of light and fun. I mean, it's just a little bit of both here.
Anastasia, that's really interesting, the little juxtaposition that you've got right there. It's absolutely wild what some people are having to go through right now, and it's different in every community. As you point out there in Vallejo, you might have to run over these fairgrounds. In some communities, they don't even have battery backups on some of the stoplights in town, so there's safety problems in addition to the inconvenience of not being able to use water, which is a necessity for life. So thank you for shining a light on what's going on there in Vallejo tonight. We appreciate you staying on it, Anastasia.
All right, and we want to see if we can get over to Kevin John. Is he? Hi. Is Kevin John available here? Oh, hello. Hi. Okay. Oh, we're working on it. Okay, so let's go back to that because we're talking about the water emergency.
Hey, we're rolling on the fly. It's live, not television, but internet.
Okay, so we're kind of just waiting on Kevin John's shot. Paradise went through that water issue, talking about Vallejo going through that water issue too. It is difficult. I mean, when I went over to Paradise talking about that water issue, people were living off of bottled water, and some people were worried about even rebuilding because of the water issue.
They haven't cleared all of. I was actually just talking with Paradise Irrigation District the other week, and they're still going out and clearing out contamination from that fire. It's interesting though, the power issue affecting water, that happened on the day of the campfire as well. They lost pressure in some parts of town because they needed a charging station to really bring up the water pressure in it, and it actually affected the firefight. So it's one of these ways you wouldn't think of. You think that, the power shut off, that's going to prevent a fire. But if a fire does spark from some other reason, you got to be worried right now because it's possible you may not have access to, water in some of these communities, much like we're worried about cell phone towers going down or street lights going out. I mean, there's a lot more that happens when the power goes out than a lot of people really think about outside of their own four walls in their home, where a lot of people are stuck right now without power, living like it's the dark ages here in the wealthiest state, in the wealthiest nation on earth. I keep coming back to that. It just seems really ironic that this would be happening here. Okay,
I think we're going to go to Kevin. Okay, all right, Kevin. Kevin has been making his way over to the Kincade Fire. I hear that
he's gone to Windsor, which is where the head of the fire is. For those not familiar with Windsor, that's just a bit north on 101 from Santa Rosa.
So it's taking him a few hours to get there. I don't know if we're able to pull Kevin John up. All right, there's Kevin John. Wow,
and he's got his mask.
All right, okay, so Kevin John, tell us what you're seeing. What have you been experiencing? I know it's really windy out there. It sounds like it.
Let me pull this down actually so I can hear a little bit, so I can speak a little bit better. But yeah, we are actually in Windsor right now. As you can see behind me, this is the Kincade Fire. We're actually at, this is a barn right here. And
what I think we're going to do. I think we're going to ask Kevin to go ahead and file a recorded report for
there, and they're telling me that they've been slowly battling this fire behind me right here, but because of the winds that you guys have been talking about all night here, the winds have really have taken this fire over in this direction. Keep in mind, this fire started about 13 miles away from here, but with the past 24 hours, with all the winds that we've been getting, it has really been pushing the fire. I'm going to try to walk over here a little bit closer, just guys, as we get a little bit closer.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, that happens, especially with...
Oh, no, and we were just talking about all the infrastructure that gets affected. He's relying on cell phone technology to bring us this live shot in full transparency, and that's why he's having trouble getting us that report. We're going to ask him to file a report for us so that way we can get a better sense of what's going on in the ground, but I think we got a pretty good taste, even just from that scratchy feed that he had right there, that, you know, this thing is really spotting around
And that
tonight.
glow behind him, that I just can't get over that, because I remember seeing that. That was one of the scariest fires to cover, was Paradise, because we were on one of the roads where you just couldn't see how far that fire was because of where we were. It was just so mountainous too, and it was windy and it was scary. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You know, you know the fire just by the glow. Yeah, it's just absolutely wild being out there. I hope you stay safe, and we'll try and get a report from Kevin in just a little bit. In the meantime, Monica, what can we expect out there?
All right, well, this is a time lapse, kind of taking you through the daytime hours into the nighttime hours, and you can see lots of smoke coming out of that fire. Now, this is a camera that's actually off to the west, looking east, but look at all that smoke. I mean, it's an explosion of smoke as we headed into the 6:30 half hour there towards 7 o'clock. And then we're going to take a couple of different camera views here. This one is going to be pointing more from the north to the south. And again, smoke just continuing to come out of this fire. You'll notice right at the baseline there, you'll see a little bit of the fire and the glow, and then a lot of lights kind of zooming in and out. Those are actually cars that are moving just outside of the perimeter of that fire. The last image that I'm going to show you is going to be one that's going to be looking from more of the south up to the north there. Well, it's more to the north from the south, I should say. But what I want to point out, look at that line there shaking around, just kind of illustrating how strong those winds are. And again, explosive fire growth as we get into the 6 o'clock hour this evening. A lot of fire growth happening, and unfortunately due to the wind. So let me take a look at the maps now as we take a closer inspection on where the growth was happening. You saw it from more of a satellite or a video image. Now this is from satellite imagery where we can detect the hot spots. So the Kincade Fire, as we were hearing from Kevin John, way up to the north here. This is where everything is growing. This is where Kevin John was, right here along 101. What fire crews were trying to do all day today is protect that fire from going over 101, heading more deeper into Windsor, which actually has a community there. It's not like they're protecting it from going into a canyon that doesn't have homes or anything. There's actually homes and a community there. Healdsburg also just on the fringe there of having an active fire spot. All of this driven by those strong north winds. So again, they head from the north, pull down to the south. So that's why we were seeing all of the growth pretty much happening on the southern end here, as well as just off slightly to the east. And that will continue again for tonight. Now, you'll also notice a very impressive smoke plume, primarily pushing off the coast. That does not mean we weren't affected by it, though. All of that particulate matter goes up into the sky, heads into parts of the valley. And then we had all these little spot fires throughout the day that we were continuing to chase here at ABC 10. It was just deploying people all over the city. It felt like at one time, even up towards Grass Valley. Some of those were contained pretty quickly. Nonetheless, lots of smoke in and around the region. So I want to show you what it looked like at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Hazardous air in places like Stockton, Modesto, Rio Vista, over towards the Delta, even the East Bay Area, Antioch and Livermore. Part of that coming in from the Kincade Fire, part of that coming in from a fire in Vallejo. There were a couple of little spot fires over in Contra Costa County. It did start to clear out somewhat by about 5 o'clock, but don't be surprised if you're still smelling some smoke there. You did do that again. He just that camera is really far away, so Brandon's trying to get more information for us. Don't be surprised if we still are smelling some of that smoke around the region for tomorrow morning. Just a precaution. Might want to keep it indoors and keep the doors and windows closed as much as possible. All right, taking a look at some of these peak wind gusts from today. Alpine Meadows, 107 miles per hour. Yarbo Gap, Polga, near 70. Now that's closer to where that campfire started last year, right about this time. 64-mile-per-hour peak wind gusts for Georgetown, Vacaville 58. Current winds, they have started to back off slightly. Now these are sustained winds. Those were gusts. That means they only come up for a short period of time and then they'll calm back down. You probably felt a lot of that for today. Those are the ones that really shake things around and bring down the branches pretty quickly. So the other part of this map that I want to show you, because we can spend all day looking at the numbers, but those are only going to be select monitoring sites, okay? So the contours, these colors, really tell a much better story because they're going to show more widespread action here. We're getting some very strong gusts just north of Yosemite, some strong gusts as well just north of Highway 50 in that 80-50 corridor. And this is exactly what we were expecting. Calm winds in Auburn, but just up the hill, stronger gusts. And unfortunately, you shut down the power upstream and it affects people downstream that aren't getting much of the winds. Same goes for Placerville, only 8-mile-per-hour winds right now. Peak wind gusts earlier today, heavily concentrated on the west side of the state, 65-plus-mile-per-hour wind gusts on the east side of the state, generally in the range of about 50 to 60 miles per hour. But we saw in some places, especially around the Sierra Valley area and just down the hill, closer to about 70 miles per hour. High wind warning, now that's only going to be in effect for portions of the area, including the foothills towards Yosemite, where again, we're seeing some pretty good gusts right now. And then over for parts of the coastal valley area with wind gusts still potentially up to about 60 miles per hour and over that. Red flag warning, now that extends through a larger area. You may be wondering, well, if we don't have the high wind warning, why do we have the red flag warning? Well, it's because fuel is so dry right now. If this was a wind event in May, we might not have the same exposure and we might not have that critical fire weather because things are greener, they don't burn as well, but right now everything is very dry. We haven't had rain in 4 months for most places, and even the rain that we did have over the summer, we saw a brief little period of it, just wasn't enough to really get us any relief. So as far as tonight, again, the big focus area is going to be in the foothills here, and we'll continue to see it actually expand at midnight. Unfortunately, we're not going to see it go the other direction. We're going to see it ramp up towards midnight. Coastal Valley area getting some better relief. Again, this is at midnight, heading into early Monday morning, and then it becomes just a little bit more confined, closer to about I-80 by early tomorrow morning at about 3 o'clock. By 7 o'clock, we are done. Everything's quieting down, but we have that short window of opportunity to get better containment on anything that's burning, because by Tuesday afternoon, we're right back at it. But this time, it looks like right now it is going to be more towards the east side of the state in that 80-50 corridor and places northward towards the Sierra Valley, say Quincy, Portola, through Lassen County. That's where it really looks like things are going to ramp up. And the difference is this. Today we saw that low move off the coast, creating those offshore winds and the high fire danger with accelerating winds that move through the hills and canyons. Those are called Diablo winds up to the north. Down to the south, they're called Santa Ana winds. And here's how it happens. That high that you just saw, that big H, is in the Great Basin, and it pushes those winds towards the low. As they move up the Sierra, they actually cool. As they move down through the Sierra, they compress and warm. It's got a longer path to do so, though. When we start to move over towards the coastal valley area, you can see once again we'll get some cooling as they head up the leeward side. This is going to be the drier side of a range. And then once they head down the windward side, since this is a little more compact, we tend to get more acceleration on those winds, more drying and warming, which can be just catastrophic when you talk about a fire that may start up high and accelerate as it heads down the hill. So here's our time frame that we're looking at this next wind event. And if you're expecting power on, I'm hoping they do inspections quickly on those lines to get this done, because we're basically talking about Monday afternoon through Tuesday afternoon. That's going to be about it. Now, no guarantee that power is going to be shut off Tuesday afternoon, but if things are shaping up the way that they look like, the east side of the valley through the Sierra foothills looks like it's going to be most likely in that area. And again, because of the position of this low right here being just a little bit farther to the east with this next wind event coming in for Tuesday into Wednesday. So again, tonight, Here's the great news, is that by tomorrow at about 7 o'clock in the morning, we are out of that extreme fire danger. But then as we head through Tuesday afternoon, you can see on this map, there's a whole lot of red, there's a whole lot of orange, and it's all throughout Northern California. High fire danger once again as we move into our Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe. And lots of wind damage too. I mean, this is out of Fairfield from Fairfield Fire, just showing the trees down. Karen and Natomas also helping to really tell the weather story that was unfolding throughout the day. So many of us were doing cleanup today. I spent all day before I came into work just cleaning up everything at our house too. Weatherforce at abc10.com. Text us 916-321-3310. So for tonight, we basically have calming conditions throughout the valley. Temperatures are going to stay cool, but we gear up for that next wind event, which heads our way Tuesday into Wednesday. Tonight, it will still be steady, strong winds in the foothills by the time we get to about midnight. Much lighter winds for the valley. But unfortunately, I just can't believe this. Tuesday and Wednesday might have more power outages coming our way.
Yeah, and also to tag on to that, SMUD gave an update about 10 minutes ago that about 2,000 customers are without power right now.
Oh, again.
Yeah.
Not
So
planned,
we had
but
that
the trees
earlier.
going down and
Yeah.
everything you're just describing.
Yeah, a majority of them are wind related. But Monica, before I let you sit down,
yes,
people are asking about the rain. When is it going to possibly rain? Are you seeing that anywhere in your forecast?
Nowhere in the 10-day planner.
Okay.
Nowhere in the, in fact, I'll pull it up
Yeah.
right now. Just stay on graphics. It'll only take me a second here
I-
to pull up
I
that
know the
graphic.
Kincade Fire said specifically in that region they didn't have anything out for the next month.
No.
Which is, yeah.
No, not really nothing. I mean, straight across the board here, you see 10 days.
Clear,
of
clear, clear,
all
clear, clear, clear.
sunshine. Tuesday, Wednesday, that's our next time frame that we're looking at those stronger winds. But again, cooler temperatures. And look at this. Lows are in the 30s. So I know, Brandon, you were talking about, people were saying, oh, at least it's not 100 degrees. But when you're fighting fire and those
Nighttime
temperatures
lows.
are in the 30s.
With wind chill.
With wind,
Yeah.
exactly. I know it's still hot on the fire lines, 100% hot on the fire lines. But if you're trying to do backfires a little bit off that fire line and it's cold and
All
it's windy and
depends.
it's dry, it's a tough firefight for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Monica, thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, with that, we are going to continue bringing you our series Firepower Money. We're very fortunate to work at a station where we do some special projects that can take a year and more to report. This was an effort on part of the ABC 10 Originals team to bring you the crisis behind everything we're seeing right now, these power shutoffs, the fires that are burning. And we've been watching a section of episode 2, Power, because so many of you have questions about PG&E and its monopoly, which, as we learned in the first segment, covers an area the size of Oklahoma with the population of 4 Oklahomas. 16 million people have no choice but to get their power from this company, which, oh, by the way, is serving time for crimes right now. We're going to continue watching episode 2, Power.
Judge Alsup also criticized the millions of dollars PG&E spends to influence our politics. Dollars that come in from PG&E's millions of customers on their power bills. But the judge didn't force PG&E to stop spending on politics. The company's critics say he should have.
PG&E is a convicted felon.
Mark Toney runs a nonprofit called TURN, the Utility Reform Network, which advocates for PG&E customers. He wishes the judge had banned PG&E from lobbying and making campaign contributions.
Why should a convicted felon corporation enjoy the same rights and privileges as a corporation that hasn't been convicted?
It's a compelling point. Human felons routinely lose their rights in California. They lose their Second Amendment right to own guns. Felons can't vote until they get out of prison. PG&E can't go to prison. And it's free to spend all the money it wants to influence the politics of our state. It lobbies at the Capitol. It lobbies its own regulators. And in the 2018 election cycle, after it was a convicted felon, state records show that PG&E donated more than $4 million to political campaigns here. It gave more than $500,000 to the state Republican Party, and it gave a little more to the Democratic Party, too. It also gave money directly to candidates for office.
Why should a company going into bankruptcy have enough money and be spending their money on buying elected officials,
Governor Gavin Newsom appoints the regulators who oversee PG&E. He's working with state lawmakers to craft new laws to help keep power companies from going out of business. State finance records show that the governor and 98 state lawmakers took campaign money from PG&E. That's 8 out of every 10 members of the state legislature. PG&E gave $208,000 to help elect Newsom to the governor's office. $208,000, money from a convicted felon under investigation for starting deadly fires. There's no law against that, but we wanted to know if the governor believed taking that money was the right thing to do. We invited him to sit down to discuss it at a time and place of his choosing. His office declined. So after he signed some bills for the state budget, we showed up to his Q&A session with reporters.
Governor, why is it okay for you to take money from a felon?
And you know that the way you frame that is going to lead me to ask you to flesh
Your
that
office
out.
is aware of my question. I've tried to schedule time to talk
God
with you about
bless,
this.
I don't know what you're
PG&E was convicted of of 6 federal felonies in 2016. After that, you took more than $200,000 to help get elected. How should people trust you to be running the show to come up with the solution?
I wish you luck with whatever you're working on, but that's a strange question. So
Well, I know it's a strange question. It's a strange time, but there's a convicted federal felon making campaign donations in this state to our duly elected leaders, including the speaker, who took almost $9,000.
Okay. Yeah, look, we're trying to focus on the
It's
issue.
a serious question. You don't think people want an answer to that?
But it might make. We are focusing very, very collaboratively on addressing the issue of not only one IOU that went bankrupt, but the prospects of 2 IOUs going bankrupt. The prospect that 2 in Southern California will have a downgrade in their bond rating. That
Well
could
aware
lead,
of the issue. Is it okay for you to take the money from them with the felony conviction? They're
there's-
still serving their sentence for crying out loud.
We have additional
There's nothing-
questions.
yeah, this
Yeah,
is-
on education. I've got a policy question about the wildfire.
You're not going to answer. You're not going to answer the question.
I don't know what more I can say that will.
You can say
satiate
whether you agree it was okay to take money from a felon and will you give it back?
We have additional
I mean, it's
questions.
just, I don't
I
accept
know you have
offense.
additional questions. All right.
Policy questions about the wildfire.
Governor, you seriously won't consider giving PG&E its money back? That's a serious question.
He's gonna take a picture with these child care workers
Okay,
over here, so.
I'm not going to stop him from taking his picture. We also asked all 98 lawmakers who took money from PG&E if they'd give it back. We'll cover how much they did in money, our next episode. Governor Newsom has been talking tough on PG&E.
They do the right thing, then this is all going to be made a lot easier. If they don't, all options are on the table.
He joined the chorus of people calling for leadership change. PG&E started this year with a bunch of board members who'd been there since the company blew up part of San Bruno. PG&E changed its board. It hired a new CEO. Newsom said he was skeptical of some of the company's new leaders, but...
Got to give these folks a chance.
And what if they don't do better?
There's a word that drives shivers up people's spines. I'll give it to you. It's called municipalization.
Municipalization. Put simply, a government takeover of PG&E. To be clear, Governor Newsom isn't calling for a takeover. He's merely threatening one. He's waving this idea around like a big stick.
Is it feasible? I think it is. Does anybody want to really do that? I don't think so. That's the message I get back.
Michael Picker is president of the California Public Utilities Commission, the state regulator for power monopolies. Appointed by Governor Brown, Picker recently announced plans to retire. Under his tenure, the PUC floated this idea of a government takeover the month before Newsom was sworn in as governor. But Picker doubts it'll happen. First off, it would cost the taxpayers a fortune to buy out PG&E through eminent domain. And if we did, taxpayers would be on the hook for the damage next time this now notorious power grid sparks a fire.
Why would the state want to take on that risk? Why would any local government want to take on that risk?
And it's not like PG&E would just accept a takeover. The people of Sacramento voted to buy themselves out of PG&E territory back in 1923. PG&E fought it tooth and nail in court for 23 years. It wasn't till 1946 that PG&E exhausted its last appeal and the voters of Sacramento finally switched over to SMUD. But SMUD customers do pay less today than PG&E customers do. There are ideas besides a takeover, like splitting PG&E up into smaller regional companies.
or we need to change the company and have another company run the electric system, another company run the gas system. We cannot keep business as usual.
Any change would require action, because waiting PG&E out isn't a strategy. When does PG&E's monopoly expire?
It does not generally. It's always been sort of a long-term proposition.
You heard him right. PG&E has a monopoly that never expires on its own. Regulators are frustrated. They've tried to punish PG&E into better behavior. Is PG&E a bad company?
They have not prioritized safety in the way that we have a right to expect. And the real question is, what do you do? We fined them $2.4 billion, the largest utility fine ever in the U.S.
That is a big fine, and it sounds impressive, but here's the thing. Part of the PUC's job is to keep utilities in good financial health. Let that sink in. This agency can punish utilities, but it never wants to punish them so much that it really hurts their business. And there's a reason for that. It protects your power service, but still, it's a catch-22. And there's a bigger issue here that most people don't get. It sounds all well and good to say that PG&E is regulated, but that might lead you to believe that the state keeps a close eye on what the company's doing on the ground to make sure it's safe. It doesn't. Consider this. PG&E has 100,000 miles of power lines above ground in California. How many miles is that? Picture the entire U.S. interstate highway system. Now double it. That's how many miles we're talking. Imagine how many people it takes to police those miles, and consider this. In all of Northern California, the PUC employs only 12 engineers to do inspections. That means each one would need to be in charge of 8,300 miles. But those 12 people don't only cover PG&E, they handle all the utilities, like phone lines too. The point is, no one from the state actively polices PG&E's work to make sure it's all being done safely. Our system is built on the idea that utilities will police themselves because it's in their own best interest. And yet, we keep getting burned. Governor Newsom is using that same mentality. When I asked him what might trigger a government takeover, he dodged with this.
It's in their interest at this stage to wake up to the new reality.
Governor Newsom did propose a new wildfire safety division inside the PUC. As of yet, it's unclear whether that means hiring more inspectors or exactly how many. So why are there so few inspectors to cover so much ground?
We are a rate-setting agency. We look at what is the need for infrastructure.
Safety was not a very high priority.
Steve Weissman used to be one of the PUC's judges handling disputes about power companies, including PG&E. He's now a professor at UC Berkeley Law. His impression from inside the PUC was that everyone figured we could just get by with only a rare spot check here or there. The lack of inspectors was one thing, but Weissman says there was also a mentality behind it. The government watchdog, he says, trusted PG&E.
The assumption was they don't need to be watched all that closely because they're going to do the right thing.
Trust in PG&E is in much shorter supply right now.
I would just like to feel secure that they're doing the best that they can.
Robin and thousands like her who lost their homes and their communities want somebody out there to make sure the power grid is safe, not just to trust that it's safe. In fairness to the PUC, safety was never a job it was designed to do. It's there to watch the money, more like the IRS and less like cops on the beat. Picker says that might have to change.
There's not a state safety agency. In that vacuum, we sort of have to do this. Who else will do it? Will the Attorney General do that? Will the federal courts do that? They tried.
The courts did try, but they're not done. PG&E's court troubles are far from over. Prosecutors want to charge it for killing people because of the Camp Fire. What that might look like next.
All right, and you can watch the entire series at firepowermoney.com. I'm also putting links down in the comments as well.
All right, Anastasia Bolton is over in Vallejo, and she's been monitoring the water situation over there, from fires to now we're talking about water.
And so, guys, we're in Vallejo tonight because Vallejo is unable to treat the raw water, unable to pump it for treatment and then, of course, release it to its residents. So they're asking people to limit their water usage, at least at home. They're forbidden from watering outside. And when it comes to inside your house, they're asking to limit the dishes, the flushing of the toilet, the showers, because it's unclear at this time when the power is going to be back on in at least 40% of the city. So the treatment of the water can be back on. Here is what the public information officer for the city of Vallejo had to say to us.
Not in the last several years. We haven't seen restrictions on water like this. We have had other major water main breaks where water has been impacted and people have been completely without water. And so we did kind of operate the EOC 4 years ago for the Broadway water main break. But that was about a quarter to a half of the community. So this is something that the city has experienced kind of at a different level. We've been able to support our residents in getting water back on and getting bottled water and those needs fulfilled. It's just a different event because of the power outage. So as soon as we can get raw water flowing again, we'll be able to treat it and turn it around very quickly.
So the interesting part about this story is the juxtaposition, right? Between a couple of miles from here, people are sitting in complete darkness, and behind me is a amusement park, right? And you can hopefully see the lights. I can hear the screams from here. It's fantastic. People are having a great time. But while there is power here, as I mentioned, a few miles in either direction, there is none. And we are also on the property of the Vallejo City Fairgrounds. And so when you go literally across the dirt parking lot to the other side, that's where there is a tent set up for cell phone charging. And it's been used already today by the people who don't have the power. So folks are having fun, which is fantastic. And some people, of course, are waiting for the power to be turned on, which at this point is unclear when that will happen, and are trying to limit their water usage. At least that's what the city is hoping that they do. Guys.
Anastasia, is it your sense that they're telling people we want you to restrict your water use tonight? Do they have just like a small reserve of water that's basically been treated, but at some point they're going to have to shut the taps off? Is that the concern?
Yes, that's exactly right. Do you work for their utility, Brandon? It seems like you know a whole lot. They did. Before the power was shut off, they treated a certain amount of water, and when the power is gone, that's the only water they have left, right? So they're telling us that they're working on getting essentially a giant generator so they could treat the water. But while that is not a solution that is in place at the moment, and it's unclear when the power from PG&E will be back on, they're asking the residents to be judicious with this very, very precious resource.
Well, we appreciate the update out of Vallejo. It's just absolutely wild. We understand that there's been actually a state of emergency declared as well, just while we were talking, Anastasia. So thank you very much for bringing us up to date on the situation there.
Yeah, so we're waiting for Giacomo. We just got this alert right now that City Manager Greg Nyhoff signed a declaration of emergency for the city of Vallejo in response to extreme events, including the recent power outages, fires, and a potential water shortage. So just got that information just coming in.
Yeah. We also want to talk about some school closures because this power outage has tentacles that run all over the place. We're working on getting a graphic together for this, but in the meantime, we just want to give you the information about where you cannot go to school tomorrow. On October 28th, the following are going to be closed. We got Black Oak Mine Unified School District, all the schools there. Camino Union School District, all schools. Is this El Dorado County's main campus in Placerville? Also charters up there, the alternative programs in El Dorado County out, as well as El Dorado Union High School District. They're gone as well. So lots of schools up in El Dorado are out. Ponderosa, El Dorado, Union Mine, Virtual Academy. I don't know where ROP is. We've got this is kind of coming up messed up on our little list here. Do we have the...
I'm trying to look at some of the outages. Oh, I don't know. Oh, there we go.
There, we got it. Okay, hold on. We're working on this real quick. We got a list over here that's a little bit better.
Yeah, so it's a little bit harder to see in the prompter there, so it's a little bit better when you read it down here.
Here we go.
Oh, there's the list right there. So just take a look.
This is easier, folks.
Yeah, just read it.
Here we go. Our crack graphics staff. coming through. All right, so yes, there's everybody in El Dorado, as well as Gold Oak Union School District. So this is going to be something that people are going to feel. And, you know, we may very well see that repeat throughout the week since we've got more shutoffs in the works.
Yeah, and I just want to address one of the comments here. There's Johnny's talking. He's, okay, so when he's talking about our outer towners. Okay, let's I'm just gonna be frank with this. Our company is really awesome with TechNet. When there are big issues that are happening, we bring reporters from all over the country to help us because we want to give you the most full coverage as possible. I mean, I've been here from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. and then I came back here. I mean, I'm exhausted, but we have reporters.
I was in South Carolina last year for Hurricane Florence, talking about places I've never been to. So
so it's just kind of important just for people to be aware, but it's also why we're on the air right now for the past few hours on digital. So
if somebody slips up pronouncing a city name, hey, at least we got somebody there. We're trying to check on places for you. All right. So calm down. We know how to pronounce Vallejo. It's cool. Everybody's good. All right, hey, Giacomo Luca is on Highway 50, where we've had some he's not ready. We were told Giacomo is not ready. So,
okay, so I don't know if there's anything else that we can go to, but someone did bring this up, and I think this lady was really sweet. I think from our comments earlier, she asked if we can all come together and help PG&E and basically take down some of these downed trees and all the stuff that PG&E should be doing. Another guy wants to create a company out of it as well.
Yeah, well, actually, there's a lot of work to be had in that. PG&E is hiring all kinds of contractors right now. They've got a federal judge breathing down their neck to do more. The fact is, PG&E by law is required to trim trees away from its power lines. Fact is, they just haven't been doing a very good job of that historically. They are trying to play catch up at this point, but they're playing catch up with 100,000 miles of power lines, as we were learning in episode 2 of Fire, Power, Money, Power. The first block, for those who were watching it, described just what a big section of power line we're talking about. 100,000 miles is double the interstate highway system in this country. So if you think about that, and just having to look at every mile of that grid and make sure that it's up to safety standards, that would require a big operation. Apparently there hasn't been a big enough operation in the last decades to make sure that that was getting done right. Now we're playing catch up. The result, we got 3 million people without power right now because we can't trust it to be safe when the wind is blowing right now. So.
Yeah, and so many communities impacted, especially in Placerville. That's one of the communities one of our groups went out to, and this is their third power shutoff just in the past few weeks.
Yeah, this was Team Boise, by the way. We told you we're bringing people in from all over the country. Anastasia came in from Houston, got stuck on a plane and brought out here. Joey Prechtel is out in Placerville taking a look at what this is all doing to the businesses there.
Downtown Placerville is really split into two different sections today. You have businesses on one side of the street that are in the dark due to the PG&E Power Shutoffs, but then businesses just on the other side of that very same street have their power and they're open today.
Millie the Meerkat?
The Bookery is one of those stores in the dark, as customers used flashlights to look through books they wanted to buy.
Book shopping by flashlights, pretty rad.
That's Allison Bendel. She came to Placerville with her family after their original plans fell through.
So we came to go on the train rides up in Shingle Springs. They do like a Sunday train ride, but they weren't doing it because of the weather and the power outages.
And the Bookery is one of her favorite stores. Darren Coelho runs it.
Business has been down pretty significantly on the days that we've had no power.
While one side of the street is in the dark, the other is far from it.
One side of the street has underground lines because the government buildings are on that side. This side of the street has above ground lines. So that side is able to tap into generators that our city has.
So while the Bookery is running in the dark, other stores like Man Cave Placerville do have power. But one thing is weird about this store having power. It's on the same side of the street as the Bookery. Todd Pickett, the owner, says this is different than the last time PG&E shut off power on Thursday.
We didn't have power then, and then 2 weeks before that, we didn't have power. So we've been out, and then the city's been doing some things to help the businesses.
Both stores hope these power shutoffs become a thing of the past, since it's hurting their bottom line overall.
This street's lost thousands, if not millions of dollars. The restaurants have lost food. People aren't coming down. People aren't going up for Apple Hill. So it's costing us millions of dollars.
I talked with a rep from PG&E earlier today. He was at the Community Resource Center here in Placerville. He told me that the community can expect to have the all clear tomorrow morning starting at 6 o'clock. However, that does not mean that the power will come right back on at 6. All that means is that crews from PG&E will start going out, inspecting the power lines, checking for damage, checking to see if it's safe to turn that power back on. Back to you.
All right, so we've been following breaking news all day and all night. We've got more than 3 million people without power right now, thanks to these PG&E blackouts. This is all being done to prevent fires. We've been learning about PG&E and some of the systemic problems there as we've been running segments of Fire Power Money. We also have fires burning all over the state, including one where we've got questions about whether a PG&E power line might have been the cause behind it. 180,000 people evacuated all the way from wine country down to the coast because of the Kincade Fire tonight. No idea when they can come home. Meantime, we've got our Giacomo Luca up in the hills.
Yeah, I believe he's in Pollock Pines. I don't know if we can go to him right now. I heard he's ready. He had 2 interviews, so hopefully he can get some more information for us. Giacomo, what can you tell us about over there?
Well, we're definitely talking to all these folks here that have been dealing with these public safety power shutoffs for really the past month or so. That's when Pollock Pines got its first public safety power shutoff. Now, as you look around this gas station, well, it hasn't shut the power off. Why? Because, well, they have a generator. We talked to the manager actually a couple of weeks ago when that first public safety power shutoff came here, and they were one of the only places open because the owner of the store decided that it was in the store's best interest, because there's not a lot of places up here, to go ahead and invest thousands of dollars in a generator to be able to keep the pumps on, to keep the lights on, and to keep the store operating. Now, if you look over here, actually, let's walk down here a little bit. We've got, we'll show you over here. There's a Safeway, only grocery store in town, right? Oh, coming in a little hot there, buddy. So there's a Safeway over here, and during the first public safety power shutoff, this Safeway, it did not have a generator, but they have since brought in a generator, so now Safeway is able to be able to stay open during all of that. Now, we've been talking to folks that live in this community, and you know, a lot of folks have mixed emotions about this whole thing. I just talked to Wayne McBride. He said he's been living here for quite a while. He's 77 now. His wife's on oxygen, so he's one of those families that have to rely on, you know, medical necessity for energy. But he says he's had a generator for 15 years, so he's been prepared because this area has, you know, a lot of snow, especially during the wintertime, and those intermittent power outages are just something that are a little bit more common for the folks that live here up here in the mountains. But he still said, you know, he believes that PG&E and utility companies have a responsibility to maintain their lines. But in the meantime, he also understands that at this point, if they can't maintain their lines, then the best thing to do is to shut the power off to be able to prevent any of these major catastrophes like we've seen in the past several years from happening. So mixed emotions, folks are dealing with it. Lots of schools in the area are going to be closed tomorrow. Lots of businesses are going to be closed in the area tomorrow, and maybe over the next couple of days, and they have been shut down for the past couple of days. So something that folks are just starting to get used to, but they're certainly not stopping in terms of putting the pressure on these companies to say, hey, fix your power lines, fix whatever issues you have with maintenance on these lines, so then this isn't something that becomes what everybody keeps saying, the new normal. We're in Pollock Pines. Back to you.
Okay, all right, Giacomo. Now we're going to go over to Monica because I'm really curious about the winds, because PG&E told us that there's a likelihood that some people that lost power, they may not be getting power before that next wind shift hits.
Yeah, exactly. And we're just now starting to see it pick up primarily in the foothills. I know this graphic may be a little bit hard to read, so I'm going to point out the numbers for you. This is basically I-80 here. Here's Alta, Gold Run. And when we start to look in between that 80-50 corridor, so through some of these canyons where those winds accelerate, we're looking at a 59 mile per hour wind here, 56 mile per hour wind a little bit farther to the south. And then when we look around Highway 50, 51 mile per hour wind gusts right now near Kybers, where they had poles down and the highway closed for a period of time. Slowly started to reopen. That's where Giacomo Luca was just a little bit ago. He's been running around. He was on I-5 for the fire, then over to Highway 50 for the road closure. Now he's in Pollock Pines, just down the hill, talking about the power outage. This just kind of helps to tell the story of how quickly we've had to mobilize everybody throughout the day, depending on how this wind event was really migrating from the west side of the state to the eastern side of the state. Earlier today, these were some of the wind gusts we were looking at. About 76 mile per hour wind gusts a little farther to the north, closer to where we had the Camp Fire last year. And near the Kincade Fire, we had some reports of almost 100 mile per hour wind gusts. Now, those are just short bursts of wind, and they can certainly help explosive fire growth. But really what's going to drive a big part of the growth is the sustained winds. And we were looking at those out of the north and northeast, meaning basically coming in from the north, pushing south. So here's the Kincade Fire, and you can see all the active fire spots from satellite imagery. All these little circles indicate where they're still attacking this fire line here. So we had a bit of an offshore flow pushing that fire again awfully close to 101. We've got our own Kevin John there in Windsor. He's reporting with an active fire scene there, trying to protect the community and keeping anybody else from losing their homes or businesses. So the Kincade Fire smoke predominantly was mainly being pushed off the coast for today. That didn't mean many of us weren't feeling the effects of smoke, though. You can see that this plume primarily, again, off the coast with the heaviest concentrations, but in the green, that's showing some of the lighter smoke kind of filtering through the valley, in particular through the coastal valley area, in through the East Bay, and then through the northern San Joaquin Valley. Now, keep in mind, we still had a couple of those brush fires that were breaking out, and even some fires that were along the hillside in Vallejo, as well as over towards Grass Valley. But earlier today, around 2 o'clock, air quality actually became hazardous in parts of the northern San Joaquin Valley, with Stockton, Modesto, even towards the Delta, Rio Vista, Isleton, and then heading over towards Antioch and Livermore in the East Bay. And of course, that was also part of the reason being the Vallejo fires. We had a couple of fires actually breaking out in Contra Costa County. As they got better containment of those fires and the winds shifted ever so slightly, air quality improved. But really the caveat here is to be prepared for the potential of poor air quality until these winds die down and that risk of fire danger really starts to head out of that dangerous zone. So Alpine Meadows today, peak wind gusts were over 100 miles per hour, closer to where we had that campfire last year. In Paradise, Yarbo Gap, Pulga, both with near 70 mile per hour peak wind gusts. Georgetown and Vacaville in about the 60 to 65 mile per hour range. There were many more. Those are just a couple that I'm highlighting right there. So our current winds, sustained winds, they're still out of the north and northeast. The direction hasn't changed all that much, but the speed has. Now, these are just particular monitoring sites. What I want to point out also is that we have this nice contour map, the colors, which will help to illustrate where we're seeing some of those pockets of stronger winds, and we're seeing that right along this Highway 50 I-80 corridor. This is exactly what we were expecting here. Right just north of Kybers, we're getting some really strong winds. So Pollock Pines and Placerville actually don't even have that strong of winds, but upstream here, where we have some of the stronger winds, there's still the potential for some power issues starting fires. As far as peak wind gusts earlier today, anywhere from about 40 to almost 50 miles per hour in the valley, 64 for Fairfield, 45 for Santa Rosa. Again, these are just particular monitoring sites, but the general idea is we were seeing wind gusts well over 60 miles per hour in most areas for today. As far as the high wind warning, it's confined mostly to the foothills stretching through Yosemite, and then also just a small pocket here in the coastal valley region, which is great because, of course, we've got that Kincade Fire burning there, and we had several spot fires break out in the Contra Costa County area as well as near Vallejo. So getting everything mopped up, making sure there's no active embers is critical when we have these high winds that are at least capable of spreading the fire still. Now, what's different here about our red flag warning is it's going to cover a larger area, primarily because all of the fuel is so dry. So it doesn't necessarily take a whole lot of wind to spread a fire this time of year. We've got grasses in the valley, dense forest in the Sierra, a lot of dead trees in the Sierra, and even in parts of the foothills. And then we have a lot of brush as well. Every region has different types of fuel that can burn, and it will burn differently as well. But the big unifying factor here is the winds. No matter what type of fuel you're talking about, winds are going to spread those fires. So heading through tonight, again, the big concentration area is going to stay in the foothills all the way through midnight. We'll see some strong winds continuing on the west side of the valley, but quite honestly, that happens every night. That's not a big anomaly here. That's not something that is unusual. What's unusual is seeing this big batch of 50+ mile per hour winds through about 3 a.m. Now, just as quickly as they ramped up, they're going to shut down. So within about a 2-hour period, everything's pretty much done. And then we take a breath and get ready for the next wind event. This one, a little farther off to the eastern side of the state. The west side of the state still affected, but mostly we're going to see it just north of Highway 50 here, through that 80-50 corridor, and then north of I-80. People in Placerville, Pollock Pines, Auburn, Forest Hill, you're probably saying, I don't even want to hear it again. You're about to tell me power might be shut off. Probably. You might have to prepare for Tuesday into Wednesday again. And here's the reason why we have the difference. Today, that low pressure system was a little bit farther down to the south of us and just off the coast. With this next wind event, that low is going to be just a little bit farther to the east. So that means we're going to shift those winds from being so focused on the west side of the valley to the east side of the valley. They're still going to be strong, but it's not going to be quite as widespread as what we saw certainly with this situation that developed late yesterday into this morning when that low moved offshore, high pressure into the Great Basin, those strong offshore winds. Up north, we call them Diablo winds, down south, Santa Ana winds. For years, we talked about Santa Ana winds. Now, a couple of years ago, I was out with CAL FIRE. I was talking about the fire migration moving from Southern California to Northern California. We just haven't had the number of years in terms of our history of fighting fires to understand fire behavior as much as Southern California. The other key factor here is in Southern California, they're fairly unidirectional, meaning they're fairly predictable. They're coming in from the east off to the west, and they know generally what type of vegetation is there, what kind of fuel are they dealing with. Northern California, we're kind of new into this game. Not entirely, but given the explosive type of fire growth that we've seen the past couple of years, we're fairly new into the game. Up until about 10 years ago, some of our biggest, most destructive fires were all in Southern California, except for the tunnel fire. And that's kind of where we started to understand these Diablo winds a little bit better. They have the high pressure over in the Great Basin. Those winds are shot up the Sierra Nevada, and they actually cool. Once they start descending, they compress and they warm. Now, this is a longer range that they have here to descend towards the valley. But then we start the process all over again, and up they go over the coastal range. It's a shorter period of time, quick acceleration, and explosive fire growth at the base of those hills. And that's what we've been basically dealing with for the past couple of weeks here. It's a typical pattern in the fall because we start to see that jet stream changing, storm systems trying to come in, bringing us any rain. Headline here, there's no rain in the forecast. We're only going to see another wind event instead. So we get the drying, we get the warming of those winds down the canyon. I know it's not particularly hot right now, but generally speaking, when they accelerate, they tend to warm anything that's down below. So it'll dry things out very quickly. And that happens late on Tuesday into Wednesday with that next wind event. But again, it primarily looks like it's going to be on the eastern side of the valley and through the Sierra foothills. So tonight, we'll still have some extreme fire danger through the foothills and lower elevations of the Sierra. And then Monday afternoon through most of Tuesday, We're out of the woods, but then we're right back in it as we head into our Tuesday afternoon. And this is going to be a Northern California event. Once again, I was inspecting kind of the Southern California situation, and it looked like they weren't going to see quite the situation that we will up here in the northern part of the state. I only bring that to your attention because of resources. So if we don't have to deploy so many resources with our fire personnel down to Southern California, that does give us a little better shot to get a bigger handle on some of these spot fires a little bit sooner. So if we only have higher fire danger in the northern part of the state instead of a statewide event, it does help us with resources. Okay, so what did we see for today? We saw a lot of wind damage, trees down. So even if we didn't have the fires, we were having to deal with stuff like this. This is from Fairfield Fire. Also, Karen sending these in to us as well. And we sure appreciate you helping to tell the weather story as well in your neighborhood there in Natomas. Not to mention, right down the street, you had the fire as well along I-5, which shut down that interstate for a while. Weather Force at abc10.com or text us 916-321-3310. All right. It looks like, oh, I know what that was. That was CG11. I was like, why is Kevin John up there with a face mask? He's actually out at the Kincade.
Foreshadowing, that's why.
I see. Yeah, so he's out at the Kincade Fire. You might have seen some of the flames behind him. They're
we were trying to get
with winds. Yeah, so winds are going to back off ever so slightly for tonight. There's still going to be about 15 miles per hour, though, guys. And out of the north to northwest, those are going to be dry and generally warming winds. Everything's going to continue to dry out for tonight. So I'll send it back over to you right now.
All right. Yep. We appreciate it very much. Thank you, Monica. We got a comment from Rena who says all the stores are out of ice. And I'm not sure exactly where she is. We got ice in Sacramento. Because we're not on PG&E
no,
here.
She told us. She's in El Dorado.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So if you're willing to haul it all the way from Sacramento, I know where we can find some ice for you down here. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, in these places with power outages, I mean, that's the reality a lot of people are up against. And you look at some of the pictures I've seen on Twitter out of stores right now, it reminds you of a hurricane. You know, when people make a run on a store and they stock up on everything they can possibly
get. Milk and bread.
Yeah, all the shelves are bare. It's something I'm not used to seeing, quite frankly, you know, having grown up in Northern California. You just don't have disasters that work that way. We have earthquakes, right? They're over, they're done. And then there's the run on the stores. It's a little bit different. All right. All right. We want to do school closures for some of you folks who are just joining us right now, because we understand there are several districts that are not going to be showing up for school tomorrow. We'll let you read the list instead of us doing it, because you can find your district quicker than we can. But this is just another, you know, we talk about simple things like ice. There's also, you know, childcare in schools. That's going to be a problem for folks this week.
Yeah, and also if you have to work, you know, your kid for babysitting, or this is El Dorado County. I don't know if there's another county impacted. Is Yuba County impacted?
Yeah, so we have a couple of slates here. Yeah, okay.
Yuba
so Yuba County right here. The Environmental Science Academy. So, I mean, this is just one of those things that, you know, drives home how far-reaching this is for people and families just trying to figure out life right now. I imagine some people have just pulled up stakes and run at this point and found a relative who lives somewhere where they do have power at this point, because you're talking about possibly being a week without power if you don't get the power restored from this shutoff, and you're going to be affected by the next round of shutoffs, which we are still getting more information about, but 32 counties, we're at 38, I think, in this one. So that, you know, there's going to be a lot of overlap is my point. A few million people are shut off right now, and a good chunk of them are going to be shut off potentially all the way into the end of this week. And I mean, there's a lot of life to navigate.
Right now. Absolutely. Because I have family right in the Bay Area, and they were telling me about that as well. We want to go over to Kevin John. He took this video on Twitter, and we want to show you because he has been covering the Kincade Fire. He's in Windsor, but we want to just take a look. It's about 2 minutes, I believe.
Yeah, earlier he was trying to give us a live shot. It was breaking up, so here's what he filed on Twitter instead.
Hey, Kevin John here. I am currently in Windsor, and as you can see behind me, the Kincade Fire is catching some steam, still burning. At this point in time, we've been told that over 54,000 acres have burned, over 90 structures have burned, nearly 200,000 people have been asked to evacuate that live in the area. But I'm just going to show you a little bit what's going on behind me. This is actually a barn that had burned down here, and the flames started making their way out. Excuse me, the air quality is bad. I'm gonna put this up. But at any rate, the flames were threatening another barn that's right behind me right here. So lots of firefighters and emergency personnel are out here doing what they can to fight it. Unfortunately, at this time, only 5% contained, but a very active scene out here in Windsor as they continue to try to fight these flames behind me. Once again, over 53,000 acres have burned. There's a lot of evacuation centers that are set up, so if there are people in the area that are looking to get to an evacuation center, we have a full list of that on abc10.com. But I'm actually going to turn it around this way so you can just get a look at all the firefighters out here that are on the scene as well, just doing the best that they can to fight and contain this. Unfortunately, like I said, it's only at 5% containment. So, and another thing, it's quite windy tonight. The wind obviously is not a good thing for the fire. That's actually been blowing the fire down here to Windsor. This fire actually started about 13 miles away, but due to the wind over the last 24 hours, it has really blown the fire further down in this south in this direction. So once again, a very active fire that's going on. We're going to be out here monitoring it for the majority of the night, but I'll pan out one more time just so you guys can kind of see out there kind of what it's looking like with the fire. Once again, we'll keep you updated at our website, abc10.com. I should put my mask back on. And for anything else, just be sure to look there. We will continue to monitor the situation while it's going on. In the meantime, we are going to get out of here. All right.
Hey, well, that's the way to end it. Oh,
yeah,
my goodness.
I mean, that's the reality of covering these fires. Is, I mean, you can put the mask on, it doesn't do a whole lot.
Yeah, it really doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, you try. You do what you can, but you try to stay outside of your car in short bursts when you're covering a fire like this, because that is the reality of what you're facing. These firefighters, by the way, they don't wear masks either because it doesn't really work for them. You can't really breathe enough to do the job if you're wearing one of those masks, and they're not that effective anyway at some of the stuff that's, out in the air.
Yeah, I was talking to Sac Metro Fire. They're saying that, I mean, that helps you like from particles, but for the most part, you're
not
still
the chemicals and all that nasty stuff that's burning. It's not the stuff that really scares you as a firefighter is not the stuff that it's going to be blocking anymore.
Yeah, it was interesting to see when I went to the tank fire and I think it was Crockett, some of the news stations over there in San Francisco, they have the really big masks, the ones with the filters on
the
it.
air?
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
The
big
cartridges.
ones, yeah, the photographers have that, so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's a little bit rough as well to be wearing while you're trying to work, but there it is.
All right, so we're going to wrap things up here. We are going to be back here at 11 o'clock, and we also have early coverage starting at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yeah, but we are going to show you the last section of episode 2 of our series, Fire, Power, Money. That is the series that breaks down the crisis behind these PG&E shutoffs into its core elements, fire, power, money. We've been watching the power episode because that one answers a lot of the questions we've been hearing you ask about PG&E. So here is the end of episode 2, Power. And in the meantime, you can watch all 3 of those episodes at firepowermoney.com. Thanks for joining us, and here's the rest.
When our society has a problem that the political machinery can't seem to solve, it's pretty common to see it end up here, in a courtroom like this one. Think about it. We can't fix all our problems with drugs or mental health, and when people don't get treatment, they very often end up getting arrested. In much the same way, our rogue utility ended up here, to stand trial for federal felonies. Yes, it's imperfect, it's not always fair, but it's what there is. We covered the fact that the court can't send PG&E to jail, but it's also true that this part of our government has done more to force PG&E to make changes than any other so far. And PG&E's court troubles aren't over. As prosecutors work the case of California's deadliest fire, PG&E might have to worry about something new, being charged with homicide.
What are you contemplating right now as we look at possible criminal punishment for the Camp Fire?
To determine whether or not this is a criminal negligence, which makes it a felony, and also very well may make it a manslaughter, some 85 counts of manslaughter, as well as counts involving each of the nearly 14,000 homes, which is a part of reckless arson.
This is important. Back in the San Bruno gas explosion, 8 people died, but the criminal charges were not a version of homicide. Technically, no people were listed as victims. If the DA can make a criminal case against PG&E for the Camp Fire, the case could have tens of thousands of victims. Victims like 66-year-old Vicky Taft, who died in her living room. Her daughter Christina, who escaped without her mom, only has pictures now. Photos of old times with her mom and her mom's life as a young actress in Hollywood. Shortly after she learned that her mom died, Christina told us she wants answers. She also told us she wants action.
If there's some kind of change, I feel like that would help too, so it didn't keep happening. Something good so my mom didn't die in vain.
Robin Souza wants change too, from the people who run the power grid.
Can we do anything better? Let's try. So at least if we can reduce the chance of others being hurt and killed, that we do that.
Criminal law is a tool that can be used to punish companies when they don't prevent the preventable. A strong incentive to do better, if prosecutors can convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt.
We're not talking also just about the fines and the fees, the penalties, but we're also talking about restitution.
Another way to make PG&E pay for the damage.
It's not a case you can bring and lose.
Defense attorney Tom Johnson used to be a federal prosecutor in California. He says it's not as wild as you might think to charge a company with manslaughter. It's happened when people die in the workplace, for instance. But 85 counts?
Well, you're a defense attorney now. If you had a client charged with 85 counts of manslaughter, what would they be looking at?
Well, you'd be looking at a lot of time in prison. I mean, each count of manslaughter is potentially 3 years of prison.
255 years in prison is what a human might face if convicted on 85 counts of manslaughter. But Johnson says it's unlikely the Camp Fire will include charging a person in PG&E with a crime.
Can you put PG&E, the entity, in prison? No. Can you make things so difficult for them that they are forced to alter their business practices? You can do that. And I'm sure at the end of the day, that is what the district attorney and the attorney general want.
Courts can dish out more trouble for PG&E than they already have. In fact, federal judge Alsup, the one dealing with PG&E's probation, almost ordered the company to shut down its power grid on windy days until it can prove it's safe. He didn't do that, but he did add teeth to a law passed by the state legislature requiring power companies to submit fire prevention plans. The federal judge made that plan a legally binding term of PG&E's probation. He says he wants 0 fires started by PG&E. PG&E gave only limited access for our cameras to see a fire safety project in action, but sent us this video of what they say they're doing. The company recently reported that it inspected almost all, but not quite 100% of its equipment in the fire threat zones by the judge's deadline. If prosecutors can build a new criminal case against the company...
The worst case scenario for PG&E would be a trial. Once an entity is in trial, then you lose control of sort of the outcome and what the judge can do to you.
So there's 2 parts here: building the criminal case and then trying to settle it with a plea deal.
What is PG&E willing to admit? Are they willing to admit to a criminal violation? And then what specific terms of probations would they be willing to comply with?
Unsavory as it might sound, part of how the Camp Fire case goes could come down to negotiation. The Butte County DA is already working with the state attorney general's office, which has a bigger team of lawyers. And that's what it takes to go up against a company the size of PG&E.
You just can't start a fight you can't win with PG&E. It's a huge power player. And it doesn't matter how good a local deputy DA is. They will bury you with lawyers.
This is where the political money creeps back into our story. The state attorney general, Javier Becerra, didn't take campaign money directly from PG&E last election, but he did indirectly. PG&E gave more than $400,000 to a PAC called Building and Protecting a Strong California. That group, funded by PG&E, spent almost $200,000 on TV ads to help re-elect Becerra. Becerra's office did not respond to our written questions about how he plans to remain impartial after taking that money.
We know that this was an electrical caused fire from molten material that fell to the ground.
As for the Camp Fire itself, CAL FIRE says the sparks that started it came from this high-tension power line.
Transmission lines are very, very resilient to most conditions, and they're built to withstand extreme winds, and usually they're not a cause of large damaging fires.
It's not the kind of thing you would expect to happen.
It's not the kind of thing that we would expect to happen.
In a written statement, PG&E said it accepts that determination by CAL FIRE. The statement thanked the responders. PG&E wrote, "Our hearts go out to the victims." What didn't go out in that statement was an apology of any sort. Like the settlement they made a month before the Camp Fire, PG&E didn't admit it did anything wrong. To convict PG&E, prosecutors would need to prove wrongdoing, that somewhere along the line the company was criminally negligent.
You have to get inside PG&E's mindset, but they're not a person, they're a company.
Correct.
So how do you do that?
By showing activity, just like if you try to get inside someone's head and they're not talking. You say, okay, so what activity did they do? What were their actions or lack of action?
Investigators are digging through all the evidence they can get their hands on. Communications, financial records.
Right now, we're looking through terabytes of digital information. Every day is something, we discover something new and interesting.
PG&E will be arguing at some level that they were doing everything they can to make sure that fires didn't start. And that's where the case will be fought. Were they doing everything they could do and everything that was reasonably expected of a public utility like PG&E, versus were they simply cutting corners and just hoping it didn't break out and cause a huge fire?
Our justice system and our state government will be working on this crisis for years. Many fire seasons will come and go. The people who escaped paradise don't want anyone else to go through what they did. Whoever runs the power grid in the future, they don't want it to spark preventable fires on windy days.
Try and correct whatever is wrong and not just say sorry and go about your business as you had before.
For now, who's running it is PG&E. PG&E promises it'll do better. We've heard that promise before. As long as it holds the monopoly, PG&E will have massive amounts of power.
We would like for them to be accountable, you know.
Some argue that PG&E's too big to succeed. It's definitely too big to fail. The lights would go out on 16 million of us. Ending the monopoly would be painful and expensive. Keeping the monopoly is a bet that we can rehabilitate a corporate criminal, living free in San Francisco, who's never spent a night behind bars.
I don't know what more I can say that will
You can say whether you agree it was okay to take money from a felon and will you give it back?
In our final episode, we'll keep tracking the politicians who took money from PG&E. We'll also break down how and how much California's fire crisis will cost you.
There's not enough money in the state of California to continue to do this year after year.
What costs will you have to pay? And what costs belong to PG&E and the shareholders who own it?
The problem with it is they're not gambling with their money, they're gambling with our money. They're gambling with the public's lives and property.
And with all these bills to pay, what's it going to take to pay the most important one? Buying down the danger in our forests.
And I think we've known already for decades what we should be doing, and now we have to do it. I don't think we got a choice anymore, given where the climate's going, right, and given where fires are taking the forest.
It's a huge crisis, and we believe everyone has the right to understand it. That's why we made all 3 episodes really easy for you to watch and share at your own pace. Just go to firepowermoney.com or type in Firepower Money in YouTube. Thanks for watching.